Welcome, friends of silence and nostalgia, to History Nook, where stories from the endless flow of time whisper gently, lulling us into a deep sleep. Tonight, let the worries of the long day, the chaos of modern life, slowly melt away, like the gentle night dew melting before the first rays of dawn. Let's leave the honking of car horns, the noise of the city, and go back thousands of years, to a distant, yet familiar land, an ancient Italian countryside. There, the sun still patiently rises from the foot of the hill. The night dew still glistens on every leaf, and a diligent, restless life is slowly beginning. We will not talk about the fiery arenas with the resounding cheers, or the glorious deeds of the emperors, the mighty armies conquering all over Europe. Instead, we will listen to the stories of the most ordinary people, whose souls were connected to the earth and the sky. They were Roman farmers. Their lives are a series of long, peaceful days, tied to the seeds, the cycles of the seasons, and the unchanging rhythms of nature. Together we will explore each moment of a farmer's day, from the first crow of a rooster that tears through the silence of the night, until the starry night sky covers the peaceful fields, lulling them to sleep. Close your eyes, take a deep breath, and feel the peace seep through your senses. Let the little details of that old life, the gentle sounds of a world gone by, slowly seep into your mind. Feel the smell of damp earth after a night's rain, the rustle of the wind through the ancient olive trees, the steady distant sound of a cuckoo. Relax every muscle, let go of every thought, and let these images gently guide your mind, slowly drifting into the deepest, most peaceful sleep, as if you were lying in a Roman field under the moonlight. Now we will slowly open the curtain of morning, where the first rays of sunlight are still shyly hiding behind the silent trees, where the space is still filled with mist and the birds are still only whispering to each other in an unawakened dream. We walk gently through each beat of time, gently touching the pure moment of a new day just blooming. Every breath carries a promise, a fragile but deep hope. Amidst the silence, a new journey awaits, full of hidden meanings and untold secrets. In the kitchen a fire was lit. The smell of baking bread began to spread. Some barley porridge was boiled with a few slices of dried apples. A simple but sufficient breakfast for a peasant. Lucius ate slowly, not because he had much time, but because he believed in appreciation. Each grain of grain was the result of months of tilling the soil, sowing, watering, and withstanding drought and cold. Nothing in this life was considered small. After breakfast, Lucius gathered his tools, a pickaxe, a sickle, a woven basket, and tied his belt with a simple piece of cloth. Before leaving the house, he turned back to look at his wife and his little son, little Marcus, who was sleeping soundly on the mattress, his mouth half open and his arms wrapped around a wooden doll. He kissed his wife on the forehead, then walked out the door like a warrior entering a daily battle. No sword, no armor, just his hands and his faith. In the fields, the sky was already bright. Furrows were waiting to be plowed, young grapevines were waiting to be tended, olive groves needed pruning. In the distance, other farmers were starting to go to their fields, the calls of each other, the sound of hoes hitting the ground, the chirping of birds and the wind blowing through the golden wheat fields, all made up a chorus of life. Lucius started his workday like any other, but for him no 2 days were the same. Every day is a new chapter in the long story of man and land. And that Roman dawn, slow, quiet, but also full of life, is forever imprinted in human memory as an era when people still knew how to listen to the voice of nature. If you need this passage to be translated into a slow, deep voice, or broken down into dialogue for a video, I can help further. Dawn on the Roman fields does not come quickly. It was a slow transition of light and sound, as if the universe was also deliberately waking up quietly, not wanting to disturb the soul still sleeping in the ground. The first soft golden light began to filter through the ancient olive groves, silent witnesses of hundreds of years of history. Their leaves trembled gently in the early morning breeze, creating a whispering sound like a morning greeting from the heart of nature. Those fragile rays of sunlight gently touched the crimson roof tiles of the stone-walled houses, roofs built with mountain stones, lime mortar and the rough hands of the men of this land. On their rough surfaces, green moss covered the untouched places, as if time had decided to stop there. Each tile, each crack on the wall was a piece of memory, telling stories about ancestors, about old crops, about distant conquests. The dew still lingered on every blade of grass. Tiny drops of water gathered there, sparkling like gems in the morning light, making the fields look like they were sprinkled with diamonds. The air was humid but not unpleasant. It had a distinct, very special scent of earth, of young grass, of tree sap, mixed with the smell of animal hides and ashes from the neighboring roofs. It was the smell of life, wild yet familiar. Take a deep breath, feeling that coolness seep into my chest, as if it washed away all the worries left over from last night's dream. It was the purity of a morning 1,000 years ago, when the world was not in a hurry, when people lived more slowly and closer to Mother Earth. Inside a small house nestled quietly in the middle of a valley, a house made of rough stone, with a roof of wood and clay, just high enough for a man to stoop to enter, Lucius, our farmer, slowly awoke. He did not wake up to a bell or a clock or a siren as in modern times. He woke to the whisper of the wind through the thin wooden window, to the scent of the slowly cooling fire, and to the feeling of light touching his eyelids. His bed, if it could be called a bed, was simply a straw mattress covered with a rough linen sheet, or a hand-woven sheepswool rug his wife had made during the long winter months. Set on the hard-packed earth, it had no legs, no frame, but it held Lucius all night long, amid the chill seeping from the earth and the constant buzz of insects. A soft yawn tore through the silence of the room. Lucius stretched, his joints creaked softly, a familiar song of age and hard work. On his tanned and somewhat haggard face, there was still the mark of deep sleep, a dreamless sleep rare in a busy life. He sat up slowly, looking around the room. It was a small but cozy space, a few bamboo baskets of herbs hanging in the corner, an old earthenware water jug, a few rusted iron utensils. On the opposite wall, a small carving of Jupiter was carefully placed in a stone niche, a quiet reminder that even in poverty, people still needed divine companionship. The rooster crowed in the distance, regular, steady, and confident, as if it were the first to take control of the world each morning. Lucius smiled. He knew he could not linger any longer. The fields were waiting. Outside, the fields began to come alive. Every branch shook, every leaf stirred. The first bees left their hives, buzzing around the sleepy wildflowers. A small dog trotted across the yard, tail tucked but ears still pricked up, listening. The lowing of a cow from the neighboring barn urged its owner on. Lucius stood up and parted the linen curtains, letting the light in. The morning sun made his eyes squint, but it also brightened his face. Every new day was a gift, and he, even though he was a peasant, knew that better than anyone. He stepped outside, his bare feet touching the dewy ground. Each step was a connection to Mother Earth. He wore no shoes, he didn't need them. The skin on the soles of his feet was used to thorns, to stones, to small scratches without complaint. His footsteps were so light that they were barely audible, but to the earth, to nature, they were a greeting. Lucius walked to the stone well in the middle of the courtyard. The wooden bucket was pulled up by a crank, making an old creaking sound. The water was cool and clear, as if drawn from deep underground, a place that had never known dirt or war. He washed his face, letting the water wash away the last traces of sleep, then scooped up a large gulp and drank it straight, cool and refreshing to the core. From behind, the footsteps of his wife, Aurelia, sounded as soft as a breath. She appeared, holding a bundle of hay, her hair still tangled, her eyes still misty. Neither of them spoke at first. There was no need. They understood each other through glances, through small nods, through silences sweeter than any greeting. Beside the fireplace, where the charcoal still glowed from the night before, a little warmth seeped through the cracks in the stones, spreading throughout the small honeycomb stone room built by Lucius's great-grandfather. The rough, pale gray stones had witnessed generations being born, growing up, and then aging under this roof. Though not as polished or comfortable as the houses of the wealthy merchants in the town across the hill, the house still contained a quiet, enduring beauty, a beauty of simplicity, of time, of memories carved into every stone, every piece of wood. The hearth was the hearth, where the family gathered when the weather was cold. The fire had died down last night, leaving only a few embers glowing like a heart sleeping in a stone heart. The dim light from the fire reflected off the stone walls, making the space soft and quiet. In the dim light, a few familiar objects could be seen: the wooden chair Lucius had made last winter, the earthenware cup Livia had brought home from the summer market, and the worn-out wool rug that Lucius's mother had knitted when he was a boy. Lucius's wife, Livia, had also awoken early. She did not need the crowing of a rooster or the light of dawn streaming through the window to wake her, for her years in the country had trained her to a rhythm of life that was ingrained in her, as gentle and regular as the pulse of the earth. She gently turned from the wool blanket, her bare feet on the cold stone floor, her hands pulling back her simple linen robe. Without a sound, she walked towards the fireplace. Sitting down next to the embers, she gently added a few small branches that Lucius had split the night before. They were dry, brittle, and smelled of pine resin and caught fire easily. Within seconds the fire was blazing, crackling with life. Livia raised her rosy hands in front of her, warming each of her cold fingertips. A small smile appeared at the corner of her lips, not because of anything important, but because of a sense of peace that crept into her heart, as if everything in life was going exactly as it should. The smell of wood smoke began to spread, not harsh but gentle, rustic like the land they lived on. It mixed with the smell of damp soil from last night, still lingering after the light rain, and the distinctive smell of the stone house that had existed for generations. A smell of longevity, of memories, of things that could not be replaced by any modern convenience. Livia stood up and began to prepare breakfast, an indispensable habit in the rhythm of daily life. On the stone counter, she picked up some flour, gently cracked a few eggs from the chicken coop in the backyard, and ground some dried fennel seeds. Her hands quickly kneaded the dough, mixing the ingredients, every movement rhythmic and practiced. No need to think, just feel. The aroma of toasted bread gradually spread throughout the space, mixed with the smell of wood, the smell of soil, and the cheerful sound of the fire, making the small house suddenly warm, lively, like a true home. Meanwhile, Lucius had woken up. Without haste, he got up, pulled his sheepskin cloak over his shoulders, and quietly walked out into the courtyard, where he liked to start his day. The wooden door creaked open, revealing the scene before him. The sky was pale with morning mist, the first rays of sunlight not yet strong enough to tear through the thin mist hanging over the fields. The air was fresh and clean, as if nature had just woken up along with man. He took a deep breath, feeling the cool air fill his chest. His breath condensed into white smoke in the chilly air of early spring. All his senses seemed to awaken after a long sleep. He walked to the ancient stone well in the middle of the yard, a place that had been with his family for generations. The well was built from large stone slabs, covered with smooth green moss. The rope was still hand-woven, the wooden handle worn smooth over the years. He bent down and pulled the bucket of water up from the deep well. The water was cool, crystal clear, reflecting his face in every sparkling drop. Each ladle of water was splashed on his face, carrying the freshness of the earth and sky, dispelling all traces of sleep. The initial cold feeling was like a sharp awakening, then quickly turned into a refreshing, pleasant feeling. The well water not only refreshed his body, but also washed away the silent thoughts in his heart. Each drop of water seemed to carry the whisper of Mother Earth, strong, deep, eternal. Lucius raised his head, his eyes on the field before him, where the soft black soil still awaited his hand to cultivate. They lay there, silent but full of life, like sleeping children, waiting to be awakened by the hand of a diligent father. He walked closer to the wooden fence, his hand lightly touching the wood, darkened by the sun and rain. In the distance was a century-old olive tree, standing silently like a sentinel, protecting the entire field. The field was not large, but it was his world. There were wheat, beans, rows of grapes his father had planted, and small dirt paths that wound like streams of memories. Each crop was a chapter in his life, each harvest a celebration in his soul. He loved the soil, loved the way it softened under his hands, loved the smell of sweat that soaked into the rough fabric as he plowed. But most of all, he loves the feeling of living fully in nature, not being dominated by the noise of the city, not being caught up in the whirlwind of money or power. There is only the land, the sky, the trees, and the loved ones. That is all he needs to feel fulfilled. After a moment of silence, breathing in the rustic air, Lucius turned and walked back into the house. Inside he knew Livia was waiting. Her hands would have prepared breakfast, perhaps a loaf of crisp toast, some soft goat cheese, a few slices of red tomato, and a bowl of hot oatmeal. It wouldn't be extravagant, but it would be heartwarming. And like every day, they would sit together, next to the lit fireplace, quietly eating breakfast in a space filled with aromas and firelight. Without many words, their eyes met and understood each other. Perhaps that was the most sacred thing, sharing the silence, the peace, and the simple happiness every morning. Outside, the sparrows began to chirp. The sun was rising, the mist was gradually clearing. A new day had begun, quiet yet full of life. Dawn on the Roman fields does not come quickly. It did not suddenly burst into light like a blade tearing through the night, but like a gentle wave, creeping through space, a slow and patient transition of light and sound. In that moment, heaven and earth seemed to breathe a sigh of relief together, as if the long night had done its part. And now it's time to turn the stage over to a new day, another day, repeat but always the first time. The first light is the light that does not blind us, but only makes my heart calm down. A pale yellow streak, as fragile as a thread, began to weave through the ancient olive groves. The olive trees have been there for hundreds of years, maybe thousands of years, witnessing generations of people born and died on this very land. The gentle light kisses each silver leaf. The leaves rustled as if telling their dreams at night. Then the light touched the crimson-tiled roofs of the village. Small, simple, quiet stone houses, where every brick, every mortar, is soaked in sweat and time. The night dew still lingers on every blade of grass. They reflect light like thousands of tiny crystals. The ground underfoot was still cool and damp, exuding a distinctive musty smell that only those who have lived close to nature can understand. The smell of earth, of life, and of memory. Take a deep breath. Feel the purity of the morning 1,000 years ago, where every sound has weight. The sound of birds in the early morning, the sound of the wind blowing through the trees, the sound of falling leaves like a whisper. In that small house in the middle of a peaceful village, Lucius, our farmer, starts a new day, Not as good as an alarm clock, not as noisy as the city, but by the natural vibrations of the universe. Lucius's bed is not a proper bed. Simply a straw mat or sometimes a rough woven mat, placed on the hard ground. But for him, it is a peaceful place after a tiring day of work, where you put down all your worries, and let your soul return to tranquility. He turned over, softly. A soft yawn broke out, tearing the silence in the room. The sound seemed to blend into the sound of the wind outside. No rush, no fuss, just a morning greeting. Lucius stretched. The tanned, lean but strong shoulders of a man who had experienced many harvest seasons. He felt every muscle and every joint revive after a night's rest. The fatigue is still there, but it is the pleasant tiredness of a deep, full sleep. His eyes slowly opened. Catch the soft light that is pouring in through the small crack of the door. The light did not blind him. But like an old friend, every morning he would put his hand on his shoulder and say, "Get up, Lucius. Another day to sow, to live, to hope." He sat up, put his bare feet on the cold ground. The cold did not make him shrink, but brought a clear feeling of awakening. He touched the stone wall beside him. The stones his father had built when he was young. Each brick seems to retain the warmth of ancestors, carrying faith in life through generations. The sound of a rooster crowing echoed from afar. Not sure which house it came from. It could be from the neighbor across the hill or from the farm half a mile away. That crowing is not simply a signal of a new day, but it is the bell of ancient life. Over and over again, like the heartbeat of Mother Earth, Lucius put on a rough linen robe. Every stitch, every patch shows how time has passed through it. But I don't need anything new, because for him, persistence is more valuable than flashy looks. He walked out of the house. The morning air seemed to embrace him with gentle arms. The damp air crept into his lungs, carrying the smell of earth, mist, and a hint of salt from the distant sea. He paused for a moment in the doorway. Raise your hand to cover your eyes, watching the sun gradually rise behind the distant hills. The fields in front of me stretch to the horizon, where vineyards, olive groves, and wheat fields sleep under a thin layer of mist. That's your treasure. Not gold or silver, but something born from the earth, from labor, from crops, from hope. Every day Lucius starts like this. No noise, no rush, but with slow and steady steps. With the belief that life, no matter how simple, is always meaningful when we care for it with all our heart. And so, the dawn on the Roman fields continues its cycle, continuing the secret conversation with the earth and sky with people like Lucius. People living in the midst of nature, in the midst of tradition, in the midst of profound simplicity. There was no phone, no internet, no digital clock. Only the beat of the human heart blends with the beat of nature. An era, a rhythm of life, that seems to have gone back thousands of years, but still remains in the breath of the earth, in the morning light, and in the memories of those who know how to listen. Beside the fireplace, where the charcoal was still glowing red from last night, a gentle warmth spread throughout the small room. The red light of the dancing fire, seeping through the gaps in the fireplace wall, made every corner of the house carry a warmth rarely seen on cold winter mornings. Lucius' wife, Livia, had woken up without realizing it. She sat by the small windowsill, where the early morning sunlight began to filter through the coarse curtains, creating faint streaks of light on the straw-covered floor. Her breathing was light and steady, mixed with the crackling of the fire like a gentle lullaby of dawn. She gently walked to the fireplace, her hands quickly lifted up a few small dry branches, sparse but enough to make the fire burn stronger. The crackling sounds emitted from each piece of wood when the fire touched it, awakening the room after a long sleep. The characteristic smell of wood smoke, strong but pleasant, mixed with the smell of damp soil outside and the musty smell of the primitive stone house, which had existed for many generations of the family. That house was not only a shelter, but also a witness to many life stories, many hard harvests and simple dreams of farmers like them. Livia sighed softly, her eyes shining with a thoughtful look mixed with the excitement of a new day. She prepared breakfast in the small kitchen, took out an old cast-iron pot and placed it on the stove. The clean earthenware bowls were placed neatly on the rough wooden table. She carefully peeled each potato, chopped the carrots, simple ingredients but the source of life for the family. The sound of knives and chopping boards rang out regularly, mixed with the chirping of birds outside the window and the sound of the wind blowing through the trees, creating a peaceful morning harmony. The wooden door creaked open. Lucius stepped out into the courtyard, his eyes looking up at the clear blue sky, a hint of the cold morning air. He took a deep breath, letting the fresh and cool air penetrate deep into his lungs, awakening all his sleepy senses. The scent of the night dew still lingering on the leaves, mixed with the smell of damp soil and weeds, made him feel invigorated. His heavy footsteps imprinted on the soft ground, each dewdrop still sparkling on the grass like small gems left from the late night. He walked to the ancient stone well in the corner of the yard, which had long been the center of all family activities. The well was built with large, rough but sturdy stone slabs, the traces of ancient hands still intact. Lucius grabbed the cold iron chain and pulled up the cool water bucket. Each drop of clear water sparkled under the morning sunlight, blending with the gurgling sound as it flowed down the bucket. He leaned over, scooping each ladle of water onto his face, the cold water pouring straight down, dispelling the sleepiness that lingered in every fiber of his skin. A refreshing feeling spread throughout his body, each drop of cool water seeping deep into his skin, making him feel rejuvenated after a long, tiring night. Lucius looked up at the vast fields before him. Winter had not yet passed, but the land had begun to warm under the early spring sunshine. The bare beds, stretched out like soft silk ribbons, were waiting for his hands to care for and cultivate. He imagined the image of green rice plants, reaching up under the sunlight, the seeds that would sprout and grow for a bountiful harvest. His eyes sparkled with hope and determination. Every year, the hard work of farming was a source of pride and meaning for him and his family. The crowing of the roosters echoed from the coop, mixed with the distant barking of dogs and the rustling of leaves as the wind blew, creating a typical country music, peaceful but full of life. Lucius returned home, saw Livia busy in the kitchen, her eyes softening when she saw him return. They exchanged a gentle smile as if sending love, sharing and together facing a new day full of challenges but also full of hope. The small room began to brighten as the fire spread, gradually penetrating every corner. The sound of boiling water on the stove, the smell of toasted bread wafting through, and the gentle laughter of the couple mixed with the birds outside the window made everything warm and intimate. This was not just an ordinary morning, but a testament to the perseverance, love and attachment in the simple, honest life of people who live closely with the land and with nature. If you want me to continue to expand or delve deeper into the emotions and psychology of each character, or describe nature and scenery in more detail, I'm willing to help. Which direction do you prefer? The dawn on the fields, when life begins just fast enough to feel it. From the calm dawn, we join Lucius in the main rhythm of the day, the rhythm of the land, of work and cultivation. Dawn comes slowly. In the fields of the ancient Roman countryside, the first light of day spreads gently across the sky, as if nature were slowly painting a new picture. There is no alarm clock, no noise of the city, only the chirping of birds in the olive branches, and the gentle wind rustling the grass, signaling the start of a new day. Lucius, a middle-aged farmer, woke up while the mist was still hanging over the meadows. His simple wooden house was nestled on the hillside, overlooking the vast fields below. The gentle morning light filtered in through the crack in the door, reflecting on his calloused hands as he tied his familiar work shirt. His eyes still had a trace of fatigue from the night before, but there was determination in his gaze, a quiet peace of mind of someone who had spent his life attached to the land. As the sun began to rise above the horizon, Lucius left his house, carrying a wooden plow and bags of seeds, preparing for a new day of work. Before him was a vast field, seemingly endless. Here the air is filled with the smell of newly turned earth, a scent that is both familiar and fresh, like a blend of present and past. To others it might have been the smell of damp earth after rain, but to Lucius it was the smell of life, the smell of work, the smell of memories that extended from his father, his grandfather, his ancestors, the people who had once laid hands on this land, tended it, and lived off it. He walked over to the pair of oxen, two animals that had been with him for many seasons, strong but gentle, as diligent as their master. Lucius placed his hand on the neck of the leader's ox, stroking it gently as a gesture of affection, then quickly mounted the plow to the saddle, checked the tethers and began the plowing, an important step, the beginning of the long journey of planting and tending the crops. The cows started moving. Take your time. Each step is a powerful yet slow movement, as if they understand that what they are doing is part of something larger, a cycle of the earth and sky. The wooden plow, its iron blade worn over the years, slowly tore through the topsoil, creating long, straight furrows. Lucius gripped the plow handle tightly, leaning forward slightly, putting force into each step to keep the furrows even and deep. He clearly felt the weight of the plow. Feel every little vibration as the iron blade glides through the hard soil, breaking it into pieces, then curls up behind her like a brown wave. Each furrowed turn was a part of the dream taking shape. Lucius walked steadily, slowly but surely. His forehead was beaded with sweat, his hands gripped the plow, his shoulders were soaked. But he did not stop. The furrows were joined together, straight and orderly, like careful preparation for a fertility festival. The land is their source of life. Lucius understood that better than anyone. He did not see the land as just a mass of inanimate matter. To him, every inch of land had a soul. It was the place where he was born and raised, the place that witnessed many changes, the place that nurtured not only wheat but also hope and faith in the future. And he was grateful for every handful of earth he tilled, for it kept his family bread on the table, olive oil in the jar, and a warm fire burning in the heart through the long cold winter. When the plowing was finished, Lucius did not rest. He sat down at the edge of the field, wiped his sweat with his sleeve, took a sip of cool water from the ceramic jug, then stood up again to begin the next part, the most important and sacred part: sow seeds. From inside the burlap bag, he gently reached in and took out a handful of tiny wheat grains. The seeds are round, plump and golden in the morning sunlight. He let them slowly slide through his fingers. Each drop falls, touching the Mother Earth like the first notes in the symphony of the harvest. Sowing seeds is not just a mechanical action. For Lucius it was a ritual. Every time the seed fell to the ground, he said a silent prayer, that the crop would be pest-free, that the rain would be timely and the sun would shine at the right time, that the sparrows would not be too greedy, and that the harvest would yield enough rice to feed his family. He walked step by step, slow but steady. Every step is a heartbeat. Every swing of the arm is a piece of hope falling to the ground. Lucius's eyes scanned every furrow, making sure no seed was left out, no seed was left behind. It was the carefulness of a man who had spent his life farming, but also the devotion of a father and a husband who understood that this harvest would not only feed him, but also the future of those he loved. Time flies. The sun was higher overhead, radiating hot rays. Sweat streamed down Lucius's face, mingling with the thick layer of dust on his collar. But he did not complain. For him this was part of life. A simple but fulfilling life, where work was not a burden but a way of self-affirmation. The only way to connect man to the world, to history and tradition. By midday, the field was covered with neat rows of furrows, thousands of seeds sleeping in the ground. Lucius stood looking at his work with quiet satisfaction. He did not smile, nor did he praise himself, but there was something warm in his eyes, a small gleam of satisfaction. A dream has been sown. And now it's time to wait for heaven and earth to respond. He gathered up his tools, unhooked the plow from the oxen, and stroked them as if to thank them for sharing the long morning with him. Then the three of them, Lucius and the oxen, walked leisurely back home, leaving behind a field that was preparing to enter its resting phase, a temporary sleep before it came to life. On every single bed of soil is hope, is the future. It is the enduring belief of people who live by the land, for the land. And Lucius, a common farmer, is the one who keeps that rhythm. The rhythm of the soil, of work, and of cultivation. Under the gradually warming sunlight, Lucius carried out the work of tending the plants. He woke up early, before the sun had even crossed the horizon, just in time to prepare for a long day of gardening. In the dim light of dawn, Lucius stepped out of his old stone cottage, carrying a basket of gardening tools and a worn cloth hat. The cool morning breeze brushed against his tanned skin, carrying the scent of dry grass and damp earth, a familiar scent that made him feel safe, close to himself and the earth. Lucius's garden was not large, but every inch of it was meticulously tended. There were rows of deep purple eggplants, clumps of red tomatoes, interspersed with rosemary, mint, and a few rows of green onions that were growing after the spring rains. Each plant had its own place, its own distance, as if they were close friends he had known for a long time. He bent down, using his rough but skillful hands to pull out each weed. His fingers threaded through the loose soil, pulling out weeds that had crept between the rows. Tiny mistletoe clung to the roots of the tomato plants, trying to suck up every precious drop of nutrition. Lucius didn't resent them. He understood that all living things were trying to survive, but this garden was his work, his life, his pride, and he patiently removed every little threat. His hands touched the ground, the cool, soft feeling of the rich soil under his palms made him feel connected to nature in a sacred and quiet way. Every time he pulled up a handful of grass, he used his fingertips to gently stroke the ground, brushing away the dirt clinging to the stems. The delicate young leaves trembled in the light wind, seemingly relieved to be freed from the parasitic roots. Occasionally he would come across some small bugs and gently remove them. Sometimes he saw ladybugs crawling silently on a leaf, or small worms gnawing at a young stem. He did not rush to chase them away but sat down and observed, distinguishing between beneficial insects and pests. With a thin twig, he gently brushed them off the leaves, avoiding damaging the green shoots. Lucius did not use chemicals. He believed that the balance of nature would bring the best harvest, if only he cared and listened long enough. Sweat began to trickle down his temples and his shirt was soaked, but he continued at his own slow, steady pace. The chirping of birds in the nearby trees, the rustling of the wind through the trees, all combined to create a gentle soundtrack to his silent work. By mid-morning, when the sun was at its highest, Lucius sought shade under an old olive tree. It was an olive tree that had stood there for decades, maybe hundreds. Its thick, spreading foliage provided a natural shelter, where Lucius often sought refuge when the sun was burning overhead. He sat down gently, his back against the gnarled trunk, his feet spread out on the sun-dappled grass. A gentle breeze rustled through the leaves, creating patches of light on the ground and on his tanned face. This is the time to rest after hours of hard work. Lucius opened the old canvas bag sewn by his wife years ago, and took out the simple lunch he had prepared that morning. A few cold pieces of black bread, a slice of hard cheese wrapped in a raisin leaf, and a few black olives he had preserved himself from the previous harvest. The food was not elaborate, but to him it was the crystallization of what he had created with his own hands, from the wheat to the olives, from the cheese knife to the canvas bag. He ate slowly, chewing each bite carefully, savoring the light saltiness of the olives, the crunchiness of the bread, and the richness of the old cheese. Each time he swallowed, he felt as if his body was being recharged by nature. Cool filtered water from an earthenware pot is what quenches thirst. The earthenware water jug, placed in the shade all morning, kept a pleasant coolness. He poured the water into his palm, brought it to his mouth and drank small sips. Each sip that passed down his throat was a cool wave that penetrated deep into his heart. It was the taste of life, of the earth, of time, a water that had not been filtered by modern machinery, but simply from the dry well in the backyard. He sat there, listening to the crickets chirping in the sunlight, the birds singing in the distance. The sounds of nature were the most exquisite symphony Lucius had ever heard. No traffic, no city noise, just simple yet vibrant sounds. The fluttering of birds, the rustling of leaves in the wind, the chirping of crickets in the thick grass. Each sound was a piece of the living picture that surrounded him, making him feel not alone, but part of an endless cycle. He closed his eyes for a moment, letting his mind rest. In the silence of the shade, he recalled his childhood. The days he followed his father to the fields, taught to feel the soil with his hands, to distinguish between healthy and weak plants, to read the light to plant the right plants. Now, long since his father had passed away, Lucius continued to repeat these habits, as a way of preserving his memory and gratitude. Although tired, but in his heart is simple satisfaction. Sweat drenched his shirt, dust clung to his arms, and the sun burned his neck, but he did not feel bothered. Instead, he felt a deep satisfaction, a joy that needed no words to express. It was the happiness of living close to nature, of nurturing life with his own hands and witnessing the daily growth of the garden he had cultivated. To many, Lucius' life might have been monotonous, poor, or hard. But to him each day was a full day. Every morning was a new beginning, every afternoon a chance to reflect on what had been accomplished, and every evening a time to be grateful for having been able to continue a meaningful day. As the sun began to move west, Lucius stood up, brushed the dirt off his clothes and put his things back in his basket. He returned to his garden, where green shoots continued to grow in the sunlight, a gentle reminder that life goes on, quietly, humbly, but with vigor. In the rhythm of cultivation and care, people find a deep meaning, more than what money or power can bring. Not everyone realizes that. Amidst the hustle and bustle of the modern world, where human values are often equated by achievements, reputation, or material possessions, but somewhere else, beside the vast fields, under the bright yellow sunlight shining through the rice branches, there is a slow pace of life, quiet, a life full of connection, full of humanity. Man, when he stoops down to sow a seed, it is not simply performing an act of labor, but rather participating in a sacred ritual, sending hope and faith into the endless cycle of nature. Calloused fingers touch Mother Earth, dig each small hole, remove each handful of soil, sowing each ray of hope in the silence of trust. It's not just labor, but it is in harmony with nature. It is the companionship of the cycle of birth and death of all things. Farmers do not control nature. They listen to it, they wait, they accept, and learn to adapt. In the wind, in the smell of damp earth after rain, during each flood or drought season. These are invaluable lessons on humility and perseverance. Every seed sown is a fragile hope. It is a quiet belief in reincarnation. One day, better tomorrow. No one is sure if the seed will germinate. No one knows whether the harvest will be favorable or not. But they still sow, still taking care, still believe. And that belief has become a source of motivation. Quiet but strong, help them through storms and loss. All were planted by rough hands, and the boundless patience of man. That hand. No diamond ring. Don't type in billion-dollar contracts. But it is the hand that feeds the world. Every callus, as a testament to real work. For perseverance. Give faith to the land. It was a peaceful journey, a silent dialogue between the farmer and motherland. No words needed, just one look, one step touches the ground, is enough to understand each other. Life in the fields, without the limelight, no fireworks, but it contains a pristine beauty, a beauty of sincere and pure life. Rustling leaves, the sound of water flowing in the ditch, the sound of hoeing, the sound of sowing seeds. All create a wordless symphony, gentle, but poignant. And that journey is not just one person's, but it is the legacy of many generations. From father to son, from mother to grandchild, they share not only techniques, but give each other the spirit of living in harmony with the land, living with trees, live with gratitude to nature. They taught each other how to recognize what the land needed, how to observe leaf color, how to feel the weather, understand that nothing grows overnight, and deep in their hearts, they understand that living a full life, not that there are many, but knowing enough, no satisfaction, know how to appreciate a hot meal, a green garden, one windy afternoon, enough to make people feel relieved, no more needed, just being able to live in connection with the land, with nature, and to myself. Conclusion. The journey of cultivation, seemingly small and quiet, carries a great message. It reminds us that, in a world that is spinning too fast, there are values that last forever. It is diligence, is trust. It is unconditional love for Mother Earth, more than a career. Farming is a philosophy of life. It's a silent journey, but meaningful, a place where people can live true to themselves, living close to the roots, and find balance in the midst of all the chaos. Maybe, deep inside each of us, also need to come back once, back to earth, with trees, and with the simple life itself, waiting for us to listen. Back at home, the fresh air of the early morning seemed to envelop everything. Inside the small wooden house where Lucia's family lived, everything was still quiet and cozy. A simple breakfast was ready on the rustic wooden table, a handcrafted table with the rough marks of the ancient wood still visible. Light from the small window shone in, illuminating the simple enameled porcelain cups, and shimmering on the surface of the steaming food. It was pulse, a traditional thick porridge made from wheat or barley flour that had been soaked, ground and slowly cooked over a charcoal stove. Pulse was not just a dish, but also contained memories of the bountiful harvest, of the land and time. When scooped into a bowl, one could see each grain of soft, ripe wheat flour blending together, forming a thick mixture, pale yellow like the early morning sunlight. Sometimes, to enhance the flavor, Lucia skillfully mixed in a little homemade cheese from freshly squeezed cow's milk, or a few carefully salted black olives, creating a rich and slightly sour taste, making the breakfast even more flavorful. The aroma of pulse spread throughout the small space, dispelling the lingering cold of the early morning. The aroma of wheat flour combined with the rich taste of cheese and the salty taste of olives makes anyone feel warm. The warm feeling from each spoonful of porridge adds energy and vitality, helping everyone to start a new day with a full spirit. In addition, there is also the crispy bread baked with hot coals in a small oven. The bread is not smooth and shiny like modern industrial bread, but is a rustic, heavy-handed homemade bread with a crust baked until crispy and golden brown, while the inside is soft, spongy and fragrant with natural yeast. Lucius uses his hands to break the bread into small pieces, so that everyone can easily enjoy it with pulse, feeling the harmony of two simple yet rich dishes. The whole family gathered around the small table, their eyes warm. Although no one spoke much, no need for elaborate words. Only the sound of slow chewing, that sound echoed in the small house, along with the steady breathing of each person, creating a peaceful picture full of connection. It was a moment of reunion, when all the worries and chaos of life outside were temporarily put aside, leaving only the love and presence of loved ones. After breakfast, Lucius stood up and walked to the corner of the house where the farming tools were neatly arranged. He began to prepare for a day of work in his vast fields. His strong and sturdy hands skillfully inspected each hoe and shovel that had worn and chipped over the years. The hoe blade was sharpened, the metal glinting in the morning light, ensuring that it would be sharp enough to help him work more effectively. The shovel handle was also carefully checked for cracks or termites, to avoid unnecessary accidents when working hard in the fields. He carefully tied the leather water bottle to his belt, an essential item to keep the body hydrated in the heat and sweat. The water bottle was made of buffalo hide, durable and heat-retaining, carrying with it a part of the vitality of the countryside. Lucius wore simple but sturdy clothes, faded with age, a rough cotton shirt, and thick pants that protected him from the wind and dust. His footsteps were light, each step was steady on the red dirt road still wet by the night dew that had not yet dissipated. The sound of his footsteps on the soft ground created tiny sounds, blending with the chirping of birds from the bushes along the road. The road led to the family's vast fields, where every year Lucius diligently planted and cared for each young wheat ear, hoping for a bountiful harvest. The light of dawn had now spread everywhere, chasing away the last patches of mist clinging to the leaves and the ground. The first rays of sunlight were like dancing streaks of gold, penetrating the gaps between the leaves, shining on the green young wheat fields, making the whole space seem to awaken after a long peaceful night. The fragile wheat ears swayed in the gentle breeze, reflecting the sparkling light like tiny pearls spread evenly across the vast land. Lucius paused for a moment, taking a deep breath of the fresh morning air, smelling the scent of damp earth and the scent of grass and trees. All these simple things, the light, the morning dew, the smell of the earth, the chirping of birds, created a peaceful picture of nature, nourishing his soul, giving him strength for the hours of work ahead. Then he continued walking, each step steady and determined, towards his field. The field was not only a place to earn a living, but also a sacred land containing his youth, sweat and love for this simple but meaningful life. He knew that every day of hard work in the field, no matter how hard, would bring hope for the future of his family, for good crops, and for a peaceful and fulfilling life. If you need, I can continue to expand on each section with more details, such as describing Lucius' emotions, the surroundings, or the atmosphere in the family. In what direction would you like me to expand next? The Journey with the Earth, a lifetime silent dialogue. The life of Roman farmers was not only closely linked to the fields, to the sun and wind, to the endless rotation of crops, but also closely linked to a profound and lasting concept: family, big family. But familia in the Roman world was not simply parents and children, not just close blood relationships. It was a close-knit group of all the people living under one roof, from father, mother, children to grandparents, slaves, hired workers. All were part of the familia. Each person had their own role. Each person contributed a part of their strength, a part of their heart, to create stability, sustainability, and harmony for the whole group. In the life of Roman farmers, the family was not just a place to return to, but the foundation of existence, the center of labor, production, living, and education. Nothing existed independently. Land could not be cultivated without the hands of the familia. On the contrary, the familia could not exist without the survival of the rice, grape, and olive seasons. That bond was the flesh and blood, the soul of the Roman countryside. In such a familia, everyone had their place. The father was usually the main pillar, the head, with the power to decide almost everything from production to education, from ceremonies to the marriage of his children. But the wife, the Roman woman, also carried on her shoulders a heavy responsibility that was not always mentioned in history books. Livia, wife of Lucius, is one of those silent women. Before the dawn could shine on the terracotta roof of the house, Lucius got out of bed. Taking his rough woolen cloak, he quietly walked out to the field not far from the house. The morning dew still lingered on the grape leaves and blades of grass, chilling his feet. But he did not hesitate, because farm work never waits for anyone. Meanwhile, Livia also woke up. She didn't need an alarm clock, because her body, used to the biological rhythm of the earth and sky, of the small house, of the beloved family. She walked barefoot on the tiled floor toward the kitchen. Her hands touched each object as a habit, as a ritual to start a new day. She bent down and lit the fire. The dry firewood, prepared from the previous days, was skillfully arranged by her in the stove. A handful of dry straw, a fire stick, and the fire began to flare up. Not too bright, but enough to warm the small kitchen, and also enough to cook for the whole family. The firelight shone on her face, reflecting a gentle, warm light. It was the light of a firekeeper, not only for the kitchen but for the whole family. After lighting the fire, Livia, without stopping, she went to the stone mill in the corner of the kitchen, where wheat was usually ground. Those grains were the result of many days of Lucius plowing, harvesting, and drying. Now it was her turn to turn them into flour, the ingredient for fragrant loaves of bread, to feed everyone. The sound of the hand mill begins to ring. Creak, 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 creak. Steadily, not in a hurry. It is not only the sound of labor, but also the breath of time, the melody of life on the farm. As Livia's hands turned the mill, fine flour dust gently rose in the dim light from the small window. The aroma of fresh flour mixed with the warm smell of wood smoke, creating a symphony of flavors, a vivid picture of love for labor. The children in the house also began to wake up. Gaius, the first son, is only 12 years old but already knows how to help his father in the vineyard. Today is the day to take care of the roots, so he prepared his shoulder pole and went with his father early. Marcia, the second daughter, 9 years old, gently helps her mother pick vegetables, wipe dishes. She also knows how to look after her younger sibling, lull her sibling to sleep, and learns folk songs that her grandmother sings every afternoon. In that family, no one is idle. From adults to children, everyone has a job, everyone has a role. And that is what creates lasting stability for the family. Meanwhile, the grandmother, Lucius' mother, was still sitting near the window knitting. Her hands trembled with age, but each stitch of wool was still steady. She knitted little sweaters for her grandchildren, preparing for the coming winter. She was not just an old person living in the house. She was the one who kept memories, the one who told stories on moonlit nights, the one who taught her grandchildren manners and morality. In the family, even slaves are not just tools. They lived together, ate together, worked together, and despite their different social positions they became part of a large family. Some people stayed with the familia their whole lives, were trusted, even loved. The old slave named Tully used to carry Lucius when he was little, still stays, helps look after the house, takes care of the garden. Life is not always easy. There are seasons when the rice harvest fails due to drought. There are days when long rains ruin the vegetable garden. There are times when we have to worry about paying taxes. But the familia, with all those people, always finds a way to stand firm. In the afternoon, after a long day, Lucius returned home, sweating profusely, his back soaked with sweat. He was welcomed by Livia with a bowl of cool water. The child's laughter echoed in the yard. The fragrant smell of baked bread wafted up from the oven. The chickens were pecking at rice in the corner of the yard. The whole space was strangely peaceful. Family in ancient Roman society was not only a living unit, that is the soul of the farmer. As the cradle of culture, of morality, of labor, it is the place where each person is born, grows up, grows old, and is buried when they close their eyes. Livia, that silent woman, is not just a wife. She is the one who connects generations. She is the one who keeps the fire burning, both literally and figuratively. She is the one who brings warmth, fragrance, singing, in a world where men often go far away. People often write about generals, emperors, famous battles. But without women like Livia, there are no such familias. The Roman Empire probably could not have survived for more than a millennium. Livia is also a skilled weaver. Not only does she know how to weave, but she also understands each characteristic of wool, each step of processing the yarn, from the time of shearing the sheep until she has clean, soft and strong wool to put on the loom. In early spring, when the sheep are brought out to the green pastures, Livia often goes with her husband to choose the sheep with the best wool. It is a mixture of experience and feeling. Just by stroking it once, she can know whether the wool can be made into a durable yarn or not. When the shearing season comes, she is in charge of washing the wool, drying it, and then combing it straight. At those times, Livia's yard comes alive with bunches of wool hanging to dry like fluffy white clouds. Then she sits down at the spinning wheel, patiently spinning each small strand of wool. The gentle whirring sound of the wheel blends with the sound of the wind, the crowing of roosters, and the laughter of children in the distance. And then comes her favorite part, weaving. The sound of the shuttle creaking, rhythmic and steady, echoed from the small room at the back of the house, where the wooden loom her father had built when she first got married was located. Livia's hands moved quickly, without hesitation. Her left hand passed the shuttle through, her right hand hit the splint, her foot pressed the pedal. Each movement was a beat in the symphony of persistent labor. She often weaves thick, coarse fabrics in light brown or light gray, the color of natural wool. Some days she dyes the wool with herbs she picks herself in the fields, tree roots, leaves, barks. The dyed fabric appears with natural, calm but vibrant shades, just like her own life. These fabrics are not for sale. They are used to make clothes for the whole family, husbands, children, even elderly parents. Warm, thick clothes to help them withstand the cold winter on the remote mountains. That is Livia's love, silent but profound, sent into every thread, every stitch. In addition to weaving, Livia also takes care of a small garden behind the house. Her garden is not big, but it is always green. She grows vegetables, onions, garlic, beans, and a few rows of chrysanthemums to make tea. Every early morning, before the sun is high, she takes a rattan basket and goes to each row of vegetables, weeding and talking to the plants as if they were soul mates. Perhaps that is why the plants in her garden are always healthy. Besides vegetables, she also grows some herbs for medicine. Rosemary, mint, thyme, are all picked in the early morning dew, then hung upside down in the kitchen loft to dry naturally. The strong scent of herbs spreads in the air, making anyone who enters the house feel warm. In the coop on the side of the garden is a flock of plump, smooth-feathered, clean hens. Every morning, the chickens cluck to each other to go find food, leaving a few warm eggs in the nest. Livia goes to collect the eggs, gently as if cherishing a gift from heaven and earth. In the other corner of the coop are a few pigs grunting and nibbling on dry straw. There aren't many of them, but enough to feed a family. She feeds the pigs the leftovers from their meals: vegetable peels, bran, rice water. Nothing is wasted. The sounds from the garden, the crowing of roosters, the squealing of pigs, the chirping of insects, blend with the sound of weaving, the sound of spinning wheels, creating a symphony of life. A simple, rustic but profound piece of music. And that is Livia's world, a world that is small but full of love and meaning. But Livia doesn't just work for herself. She's also a keeper of traditions, passing on valuable skills to the next generation. The children in her family are not idle either. From a very young age they are taught to work, not by force but with pride. Boys, when they were 5 or 6 years old, followed their fathers to the fields. They did not hold plows right away but were given small tasks: picking grass, chasing birds, carrying water. Gradually, their fathers would teach them how to use hoes, how to observe the sky, how to predict rain and sunshine through the shape of clouds, the color of the soil. They learned to listen to nature as people in the past did. The girls stayed at home with their mother. Livia taught them how to knead dough, make cakes, light a fire with dry straw, and then how to spin yarn, knit wool. The children often sat around their mother's feet, attentively watching every movement, every explanation. Sometimes they sang old nursery rhymes while working. That sound, echoing in the warm kitchen, was like an echo of time. Evening is when the whole family gathers around the fire. After a simple but cozy meal, everyone sat around the fireplace. The firelight reflected on their faces, creating flickering shadows as if telling a story. And yes, that's when the stories began. Adults took turns telling stories. Sometimes it was grandfather, sometimes father, sometimes Livia herself. They told the children about Roman and Greek gods, Jupiter, Minerva, Apollo. The myths were not only for entertainment, but also served as moral lessons, about courage, about sacrifice, about the consequences of pride. Then they told stories about their ancestors, the first people to come to this land, reclaiming the land, building houses, and preserving every inch of land through many events. Some stories are true, some are legendary, but all are told in a warm voice, full of love and pride. The children sat still, their eyes shining in the firelight, their ears straining to hear every word. They listened not only with their ears but with their hearts. Those stories gradually formed in their minds a worldview, helping them understand tradition, their roots, and their place in the endless flow of time. Livia often looked at her children at that time, her heart filled with emotion. She knows that no matter how much life changes, these nights around the fire, with the sound of storytelling, the smell of smoke, the family affection, are what connects generations. It is the invisible thread that weaves the fabric of family tradition, as strong as the fabric she weaves every day. If you would like me to further expand or adapt it into a short story, novel, or documentary, I would be happy to assist. Religion is an indispensable part of their lives. It is not something lofty or distant, but close and permeates every daily breath. The ancient Romans did not separate the spiritual world from material life. On the contrary, they live in harmony with it, seeing it as an invisible but strong link between humans, nature, and invisible supernatural forces that they believe are present everywhere. In every Roman home, whether it was a noble mansion or a humble dwelling where commoners lived, there was a sacred space dedicated to the family's guardian deities. These are small altars, usually placed in the kitchen or near the entrance, where people can easily see them every day. On the altar are small statues, sometimes just simple carvings in terracotta or stone, representing the gods Lares and Penates, the gods who guard the home and protect the family's prosperity. To the Romans, Laras were guardian spirits of places, be it land, houses, or even village paths. The Penates are the gods who guard food and prosperity in the home. They are considered the patrons of the hearth, of daily meals, and of family prosperity. Therefore, their presence is not as threatening or powerful as the great gods on Mount Olympus. They are close, familiar, like a part of the home, like invisible friends always present in every moment of life. Lucius' family too. As a middle-class family living in the Roman countryside, they were not rich or noble, but they were content and happy. Every morning, before starting a new day of work in the fields or in the workshop, Lucius would stop before the small altar in the corner of the kitchen. He whispered prayers, his hand placed lightly on his left chest as if he wanted to offer his sincere heart to the gods. Sometimes he would bring along a little flour, a few figs, or a drop of new wine to place on the altar. Simple but heartfelt offerings. Lucius' wife, Cornelia, is the one who maintains most of the daily rituals. She takes care of the altar like she takes care of a part of the house. She cleaned thoroughly, replaced the flowers, and burned incense made from homemade incense. The scent spread throughout the kitchen, blending with the smell of toasted bread and spices, making the place both cozy and sacred. Their children, even at a young age, were taught to revere the gods. They learned to stand solemnly when praying, to bow before the altar, and to understand that even the smallest prayer has great meaning. On special occasions such as Saturnalia or New Year's Day, the whole family would get together for a larger ceremony. They offered the gods the harvest of the past season, golden sheaves of grain, juicy grapes, cheese made from fresh milk, even the fattest chicken in the flock. Everyone expressed gratitude for a peaceful year, for enough rice to eat, for livestock to be free of disease, for children to grow up healthy. Prayers are not loud or ostentatious. They take place in solemnity and silence. Amidst the rustling wind through the vineyard, amid the flickering light of the oil lamp, the whispered prayers seem to permeate the space, the soil, and the trees around the house. Their spiritual world is not scary. There is no heaven or hell with eternal punishment. Instead, it is a world in harmony with nature. They believe that everything in life, from favorable weather and lush vegetation, to health and peace, has the gentle intervention of the gods. So, prayer is not to ask for extraordinary things, but to maintain harmony, to show gratitude, to keep their world stable and safe. Even in difficult times, such as when crops failed or disease broke out, the Romans did not become angry or blame the gods. They believed that everything happened for a reason, and perhaps they had neglected to maintain balance with the divine. Then the whole Lucius family would come together to celebrate, make extra offerings, fast for a few days, or hold a small sacrifice, not out of fear, but out of a desire to be forgiven and reconnected to the lost harmony. In Roman rural life, there was no clear boundary between the sacred and the profane. Belief is an undercurrent that runs through every activity, from sowing seeds to harvesting rice, from simple meals to family parties. A cake can also be an offering. A bowl of clean water can also symbolize purification. And a whisper in the wind is enough to be a prayer to the gods. Through each generation, that belief is passed down as part of identity, without needing to be recorded but still never fading away. Lucius was taught by his father how to burn incense and pray when he was very young, and now he teaches the same to his children. No coercion, no dogma. Simply a thread connecting the past, present, and future. A spiritual heritage that nurtures family and community bonds. That belief, with its simplicity and purity, was the root that helped the Romans feel secure in an ever-changing world. They do not seek great power or sublime prophecy. They just need a peaceful home, a good harvest, healthy children, and the silent companionship of little gods in every corner of life. And perhaps, It is this humility that has created the lasting strength for a civilization that has existed for centuries, not only by military power or material prosperity, but also by a simple, profound, and grateful spiritual life. If you want to convert this passage into dialogue for a storytelling video, or need it shortened or translated into English, I can help further. In the cycle of everyday life, where people are caught up in worries about food and clothing, in unfinished plans and unfinished dreams, there is a place that always exists as a solid support family. No matter how chaotic life is, no matter how tired we are from the pressures of modern society, when the door closes, another world opens, a peaceful world where each person can be themselves. In every daily manual work, before the sun had even risen, Father had already woken up to get ready for work. Mother's light footsteps echoed in the small kitchen, where the smell of freshly cooked rice spread, waking up the children who were still sleeping. It doesn't have to be something big or grand, it's those repetitive actions, though quiet, that create a steady rhythm of life, creating a solid foundation for each member of the family. When the mother's hands are dirty with flour, when the father bends over the vegetable garden at the end of the yard, when the child learns to hold a broom to sweep the yard or helps his mother pick vegetables, those images are not only expressions of labor, but also the thread of love between generations. Because through each of these small things, adults teach children about responsibility, about sharing, and about how to cherish simple but lasting values. And then came the simple meals by the fire. A familiar, intimate image that everyone has experienced. A meal can be just vegetable soup, a plate of fried eggs, or a piece of braised fish with a rich rustic flavor. But it is in that moment, when everyone sits around the old wooden table, exchanging bowls of rice, smiles and small stories of the day, that family affection is nurtured little by little. No need for delicacies, no need for luxurious parties, just being present, listening and sharing, is enough to feel warm. Family is the foundation, a concept that is not only physical but also spiritual foundation, where every human being is born, grows up, and learns how to be human. From the lullaby of mother, to the strict but loving teachings of father, from the times of falling and being guided to stand up by relatives, all create a precious baggage that follows us throughout our lives. Family is a refuge, not only in times of material hardship, but also a place to return to when mentally exhausted. Maybe out there we fail, we are misunderstood, or lose direction. But when we return home, there are still people who listen to us with all their hearts, there are still open arms, and there are still gentle eyes full of tolerance. That presence, though not noisy, brings a strange sense of peace, like an umbrella in the rain, a light in the night, or a cool breeze in the middle of a hot summer afternoon. Family is the thread that connects people to the past and the future. In each old photo hanging on the wall, in each carefully preserved souvenir, are memories, stories, cultural flows and traditions that grandparents and parents left behind. Stories about the past, about difficult but meaningful times, are not simply to be told, but also a way to nurture the soul, teach the next generation to appreciate their roots and develop the future in a humane way. It is from here that children learn how to live kindly, think of others, and understand that they are not alone in this vast world. In the warmth of home, whether it is a tiled house, a thatched house, or a luxurious multi-story house, what makes lasting strength is not material but affection between members. A gentle hug after a long tiring day, a greeting when someone coughs softly, an affectionate look between husband and wife, father and child, mother and child, these seemingly small things have great power to nourish the soul. In whispers and soft smiles, is not just empty words, but the language of care, of silent affection. Sometimes it is just a nod of agreement, a look of encouragement, or a hand holding a hand, but those things calm the storms in the heart. There is an invisible force in the family, cannot be measured, cannot be quantified by money or material things, that is simple warmth, is the energy that nourishes people over the years. That is why, when far away, people still remember the kitchen, the old bed, and the crisp laughter of loved ones. Unconditional love, no judgment, no demands, is something that only exists in family. People can succeed or fail, be rich or poor, change in appearance, thinking, or lifestyle, but the love of family is always present, always a safe place. It is love that creates sharing. When one person is sick, the whole family worries. When one person is happy, the whole family rejoices. Not because of duty, but because of something more sacred, the love between blood relatives. And above all, in the family there is always a belief in a common future. A future that belongs not to one person but to all. Parents work hard to give their children a good future. Children study hard and work hard to support their parents when they are old. Each person strives for the other. And thanks to that, the family can always overcome the most difficult times and always find light at the end of the tunnel. All of that built on the lasting values of labor and commitment. Working is not only for a living but also a way to show love. Parents sacrifice their time and health to raise their children. Children strive to study and work to repay their parents. Bonding is not just living under the same roof, but sharing joys and sorrows together, overcoming challenges together, and dreaming of better things together. It is a profound lesson in abundance and simplicity. Modern life sometimes makes people equate happiness with material things. Big houses, luxury cars, lavish travel. But then, when tired, people look for the closest things, a home-cooked meal, a hug from mother, an old story from father, and realize that true happiness lies not in luxury but in what we have. Among those who are always silently by our side and love us with all their hearts. Family is the cradle that nurtures human values. That is where each individual learns to love, be patient, share, and hope. No matter where you go, what you do, success or failure, family is always the place to return to. The place where every journey in life begins and also the place where every journey ends. Tradition and family, where the rhythm of daily life is woven. Midday, the rhythm of toil and resilience. Under the scorching Mediterranean sun. The midday sun over the Mediterranean countryside was not something to be taken lightly. It came down with a blazing ferocity that seemed to bleach the very colors of the world. A radiant sheet of gold spilled across the open fields, bathing the land in an intense brilliance that shimmered like fire on water. By noon, the earth itself seemed to exhale heat. The soil, dry, cracked, and coated in a fine layer of ochre dust, reflected the sun's unforgiving rays upward, as if the ground was ablaze with invisible flames. Everything slowed. Even the shadows seemed to crawl reluctantly across the parched ground. Lucius knew this time well. It was a sacred pause in the rhythm of the day, a brief interlude between the relentless labor of the morning and the toil yet to come in the afternoon. The air was dry, brittle almost, and carried the faint scent of olive leaves, sun-baked earth, and distant lavender. From all around him came the unmistakable symphony of summer. The continuous hypnotic trill of cicadas rose in waves, like nature's own midday chorus. To the unaccustomed ear, it might have sounded monotonous. But for Lucius, it was a comforting sound, one that spoke of familiarity and life thriving in the heat. He made his way to a rare haven of shade, a spot beneath the wide gnarled arms of an ancient olive tree. Its thick, silvery leaves barely rustled in the sluggish breeze, but they offered just enough shelter from the punishing sun to make the moment bearable. Sometimes, when no tree was nearby, Lucius would retreat to one of the makeshift shelters scattered across the fields. These simple structures, little more than straw roofs propped up with dry branches, were built by laborers like him for precisely this purpose. A refuge, a temporary escape from the burning sky above. He set down his worn satchel and let out a quiet sigh, the kind that only came when muscle and bone had been pushed to their limit. The morning had been long, filled with the methodical work of tilling, planting, and tending to the stubborn earth. Even with the rising sun at his back, the effort had soaked through his tunic, leaving it damp and clinging to his skin. Now though he could rest. Lucius sat cross-legged, letting the silence of the fields envelop him. It wasn't total silence, not exactly. There were still the cicadas, still the whisper of a distant breeze stirring dry grasses, still the occasional hum of a bee passing close by. But these sounds felt natural, part of the landscape. They did not disturb the stillness, they deepened it. He opened his bag, careful not to spill anything onto the dusty ground. Inside, wrapped in a cloth napkin that had once belonged to his mother, was his midday meal. Simple as always, humble but sustaining. First came the bread, hard, crusty, with a deep brown hue that bore the marks of being twice baked in the village's communal oven. It broke with a satisfying crunch, and though it was dry, Lucius had long since learned to savor its hearty texture. Next were the thin slices of salted pork, cured in the traditional way with herbs and hung for weeks in cool, shaded rooms. The meat was slightly oily, deeply savory, and rich in flavor. Beside it, a wedge of aged cheese, pale yellow and crumbly, its aroma sharp and earthy, completed the meal. But perhaps the most precious item of all was the water. Lucius unscrewed the top of a clay flask and drank slowly. The water was cool, pulled from a well at dawn and kept chilled in the thick, porous walls of the earthen jug. Each swallow refreshed his parched throat, and the clay left a subtle mineral tang that reminded him of the hills. It was not a feast by any measure, but here, under the shade after hours of exertion, it was as close to heaven as anything he could imagine. Lucius ate in silence, chewing slowly, methodically. There was no rush. Lunch was not merely a necessity, it was a ritual, a moment carved out of the day where one could reconnect with the land, with oneself. The fields stretched endlessly around him, golden and brown under the afternoon sun. Some of the land had already been sown, the tiny green hints of new life beginning to peek through the soil. Other plots lay bare, waiting for the right moment, for the right hands, to begin their transformation. To Lucius, each patch of land told a different story. Some had been stubborn, resisting the plow and requiring double the effort to tame. Others had been generous, yielding easily, their soil soft and welcoming. He knew them by heart, their curves, their moods, their hidden stones that could snap a blade if you weren't careful. The land had taught him patience. It had taught him rhythm. It had taught him humility. As he finished his meal, he wiped his hands on a piece of cloth and leaned back against the trunk of the olive tree. The bark was rough and cool against his skin. He closed his eyes for a moment, letting the warmth of the sun drift around him without burning, safely filtered through the leaves. His mind wandered. Sometimes in these quiet moments he would think of the past, of childhood games played on these same fields, of his father's calloused hands teaching him how to tie bundles of wheat, of the songs his mother would hum as she baked the very bread he still ate today. Other times he thought of the future, of better tools, of seasons with more rain, of harvests that would feed more mouths, of perhaps, one day, a home closer to the hills where the wind was cooler and the soil richer. But mostly he just allowed himself to be, to breathe, to listen. The cicadas were still singing, as relentless as the sun. A small bird, maybe a sparrow, fluttered down nearby, hopping through the dust in search of crumbs. Lucius tossed a few crumbs of bread its way and watched as the bird cautiously approached, pecking at the dry ground. Even in this heat, even in this dry landscape, life endured. Quiet, humble, but persistent. He knew he would have to return to work soon. The sun would begin its slow descent, and with it would come a brief, forgiving softness to the light. But before then there were still rows to finish, still hands to callous, still sweat to offer to the land. And yet, for now, for this small sacred stretch of time, he allowed himself the gift of pause. The olive branches above him whispered in the breeze, their leaves catching the light and casting flickering shadows on his face. The ground beneath him, though dry, held a quiet promise. A promise that labor would not be in vain. That the seed sown in faith would become the grain. That sweat in time would yield bread. Lucius looked out over the fields one more time, his eyes calm. His limbs, though tired, were ready. And with a final sip of water he packed up his bag, stood and stretched. The heat was still there. The sun still unrelenting. But his heart was steady. And his soul, like the earth, was patient. He returned to his labor not just as a farmer, but as a witness to the quiet, enduring rhythm of life beneath the Mediterranean sun. After a modest midday meal and a brief rest beneath the shade of an old olive tree, Lucius returned to his work. The sun still hung high in the sky, casting golden rays across the Roman countryside, illuminating the gentle slopes of the hills and the patchwork of vineyards, wheat fields and olive groves that stretched far into the distance. The air was thick with the scent of dry earth, warm grass and distant rosemary shrubs. Cicadas droned lazily in the background, a constant summer chorus that marked the rhythm of rural life. Lucius took a deep breath, filling his lungs with the familiar scent of the fields, and then bent down to continue the work that defined his life. Depending on the season, his tasks varied. In the early months of spring, when the air was still crisp in the morning and the ground damp with dew, he would spend hours pulling out weeds. It was slow, meticulous work, but crucial for the health of the crops. His fingers, calloused, rough, yet remarkably nimble, would curl around each stubborn shoot, tugging it from the soil with care. He worked row by row, scanning for the unwelcome intruders that sought to rob the growing plants of precious nutrients. Each weed pulled was a small victory in the ongoing struggle between man and nature. In the height of summer or the bounty of early autumn, his work took on a different rhythm. During harvest time, the fields echoed with the repetitive swoosh of sickles cutting through golden wheat. The sun scorched his neck and sweat would drip from his brow, soaking the linen tunic clinging to his back. But he didn't complain. The wheat harvest was a time of abundance, a reward for months of labor, patience, and hope. The ripe heads of grain, heavy and golden, bowed as if offering their yield to the earth. If the harvest was grapes, then Lucius found himself among the twisted vines of the vineyard. The grapes hung in plump clusters, their skins taut and glistening in the sunlight, some greenish gold, others a deep royal purple. His fingers, though hardened by years of toil, handled the grapes with care. Each cluster was clipped by hand, placed gently into woven baskets that would be carried away for winemaking. The sweet scent of crushed fruit, mixed with the dust and the musk of the vines, filled the air and created an atmosphere of quiet celebration. These tasks, whether weeding, harvesting wheat, or picking grapes, were repetitive and physically demanding. Yet within their repetition lay a kind of peace, a rhythm. A song that only those who labored under the sun and soil could truly understand. Patience and precision were essential. A Roman farmer could not afford haste. Crops did not yield to impatience. The land rewarded only those who treated it with respect and diligence. And so, day after day, season after season, Lucius performed these simple rituals. His life was a cycle of sowing, tending, harvesting, and preparing for the next year. It was a life of repetition, yes, but also one of deep meaning, bound to the ancient rhythm of nature itself. To be a farmer in the Roman countryside was to live in complete harmony with the elements. Lucius, like generations before him, had learned to read the signs in the sky. He would rise before dawn, standing barefoot on the cool earth, gazing upward at the sky to gauge the color of the clouds, the position of the stars before they faded, and the scent of moisture in the wind. These were not superstitions. They were the farmer's science, passed down from father to son. He could tell when rain was coming by the thickness of the morning mist or the sudden silence of the birds. He knew the weight of the clouds that meant a storm was near and how the air would turn heavy just before a summer downpour. He could read the land like a book, its dryness, its smell, its texture. These all spoke to him in a language that required no words. When drought came, as it inevitably did from time to time, it brought with it a silent fear. Cracks would appear in the soil. The leaves of the olive trees curled inward. The rivers shrank. But Lucius didn't rage against it. He accepted it as one accepts the ebb and flow of the tides. Roman farmers understood something deeply profound, that nature could never truly be tamed. It could be worked with, pleaded with, respected, but never controlled. In this relationship with nature, there was a quiet humility. Every drop of rain that fell was a blessing. Every ray of sun that ripened the crops was a gift. Lucius gave thanks not just to the gods of the pantheon, Ceres, goddess of agriculture, Saturn, god of sowing, but also to the earth itself. The soil beneath his feet was not just dirt, it was a sacred living thing. His tools were simple, yet they carried the weight of centuries. Lucius worked with a wooden hoe, its iron blade worn but sharp. He had a shovel heavy and solid, stained from years of labor. And his sickle, its curved blade gleamed in the sun when freshly sharpened, was an extension of his own arm. These were not just tools. They were companions passed down from his father and his father's father before him. Each nick in the blade, each splinter in the handle held memories. He took care of them as one would a trusted steed or a beloved friend. Each evening after work he cleaned and oiled them, storing them neatly in a small shed near his home. He believed, as many farmers did, that a well-kept tool reflected the soul of its owner. The sounds of these tools at work created a melody all their own. The crisp shush of the sickle slicing through wheat, the rhythmic thud of the hoe breaking apart clumps of dirt, the crunch of dry earth beneath his sandals. These were not just noises. They were the heartbeat of the farm. A symphony of survival. A song of honest labor. The same sounds had echoed across the Italian countryside for centuries and would continue to do so long after Lucius was gone. To an outsider it might seem monotonous, even harsh. But to Lucius, it was life at its purest. There was a certain poetry in the way the seasons guided every action. Spring brought rebirth, green shoots bursting from the soil, promise in the air, hope in every leaf. Summer demanded endurance, long days, sweat-drenched tunics, and the buzz of insects in the heat. Autumn was reward, the weight of full baskets, the scent of fermenting grapes, the sound of laughter during communal harvests. And winter? Winter was reflection. Fields lay fallow, the ground rested, and Lucius stayed closer to the hearth, repairing tools, mending clothes, and telling stories to his children about the spirits of the forest, the old gods, and the heroes of Rome. He did not envy the lives of those in the cities. He had heard stories of the crowded streets of Rome, the noise, the politics, the marble temples. But they seemed distant, abstract, luxuries for others. Lucius did not hunger for silver or silk. His treasure lay in the simplicity of life, the warm loaf of bread baked by his wife each morning, the laughter of his son chasing chickens, the smell of lavender blooming near the vineyard. He did not measure his wealth in coins but in full granaries, in sturdy walls that kept the cold at bay, in neighbors who helped one another during hard times. This was the soul of rural Rome, quiet, enduring, unseen by history books, yet vital to the empire's survival. For without the farmers there would be no grain for the legions, no olives for the oil that burned in Roman lamps, No wine to fill the amphory-lining ships bound for far-off provinces. Lucius, like thousands of other farmers scattered across the empire, was the backbone of a world that too often forgot him. But he did not seek recognition. His reward was the land itself. To walk his fields at dusk, the sky painted in orange and crimson, and feel the soil soft beneath his feet, that was glory enough. And so, as the day drew to a close, Lucius straightened his back, wiping the sweat from his brow. He looked out over the rows of grapevines glowing in the evening light. He listened to the wind rustling through the olive trees, and he smiled. For tomorrow he would do it all again. Not out of obligation, but out of love. Love for the land. Love for the rhythm. Love for a life shaped by sun, soil, and silence. And in that quiet space between labor and rest, between day and night, Lucius the farmer became something more. A timeless soul, rooted in the earth, part of the eternal story of humankind and its ancient bond with the land. In the endless repetition of labor beneath the blazing sun, amidst the steady hum of insects and the dry, earthen scent rising from parched soil, there exists a strange and quiet peace that settles into the hearts of those who work the land. Here, in this rhythm of nature, ancient, patient, and unwavering, life unfolds not in grand gestures or urgent pursuits, but in slow, deliberate movements. The fields do not demand haste. The soil does not care for deadlines. There are no alarms shrieking at sunrise, no buzzing phones interrupting the silence. Only the rustling of leaves in the breeze and the gentle creak of a wooden hoe breaking the ground. In this space, the modern world, with all its noise, pressure, and relentless forward momentum, fades into the background like a forgotten song. What remains is something older, something essential. The steady swing of arms tilling the earth. The warm sting of sweat trickling down a sunburned brow. The steady breathing of a chest rising and falling in time with each movement. It is in this repetition, this simplicity, that the soul finds clarity. Out here there are no offices, no screens, no meetings. There are only the seasons. Only the sky, vast and indifferent, watching over the people below. Only the land, waiting with quiet patience for the hands that will awaken it again. Each drop of sweat shed onto this soil is more than physical effort. It is a wordless affirmation of life. A silent pledge between the human and the earth. A testament to the bond that has existed since the first seeds were planted and the first harvest was gathered. There is a sacredness in this connection. An unspoken gratitude in every gesture of work. Every calloused hand and aching back speaks of generations who have come before, who have lived and toiled and survived by the same methods in the same rhythms. To the outsider it may seem mundane, or even obsolete. But to those who have known the weight of the sun on their shoulders, the resistance of soil beneath their tools, and the quiet satisfaction of a field ready for planting, this labor is not simply toil, it is legacy. There is no rush here. No finish line to sprint toward. Instead, there is a deep trust in the natural cycles of the world. The planting, the waiting, the growing, the reaping. Each stage holds its own meaning. Each is part of a larger harmony that man does not control but partners with. And within this harmony, a deeper kind of strength takes root. Not the strength that boasts or flexes or dominates, but the kind that endures, that bends without breaking, that gets up each morning not because it is easy, but because it must be done. It is a strength forged in sun and wind and rain, in disappointment and drought, in hope that refuses to die, even when crops fail and storms threaten. And from that strength comes resilience. A quiet, steady resilience that does not need applause, that does not chase recognition, because it is not performing for anyone. It is simply living, simply doing what must be done. In this place one learns to be grateful not for excess but for enough. enough rain to soften the ground, enough sun to ripen the fruit, enough strength to finish the day. There is no luxury here, but there is abundance of another kind, the abundance of purpose, of honest work, of time measured not in dollars, but in the deepening of roots and the lengthening of shadows. The earth teaches humility. It does not reward shortcuts. It demands presence, attention, patience. And in return, it offers lessons that no school or book can replicate. It teaches that fulfillment does not always come from grand success, but from small, daily acts done with care. That dignity lives in labor, not just in titles. That peace can be found not in escaping work, but in embracing it fully. And above all, it teaches that we are not separate from this land. We are of it, born from its dust, sustained by its fruits, and destined to return to it someday. To work this land is to participate in a sacred cycle, a whispering dialogue between human hands and ancient soil. Each harvest is not only food, it is a remembrance of those who came before, and a promise to those yet to come. In this quiet, sunlit labor, in the buzzing of insects and the whisper of wind through crops, there is a story being written each day, not with words but with effort, not in ink but in sweat and soil. It is a story of resilience, of gratitude for life's most basic blessings, and of the quiet joy that can be found in the act of working with one's hands. In a world obsessed with faster, bigger, and newer, there is a certain rebellion in slowing down, in honoring the earth, in finding contentment not in what we own but in what we do. And for those who have lived this life, who have walked barefoot across warm dirt and watched the sky for rain, who have felt the satisfaction of a long day's labor and the peace of a quiet evening, they know, this is not just work, it is life, rooted deep, woven into the fabric of the land itself. And in that life, there is beauty. Dusk and the return, when day meets night in tranquility, the sunlight of the late afternoon began to fade gently. Its golden hue mellowed into deep shades of amber, then to a brilliant orange that kissed the fields in a final fiery embrace before surrendering to the velvet cloak of twilight. As the sun dipped lower behind the rolling hills, it cast long shadows that stretched lazily across the earth. The sky transformed into a painter's masterpiece. Brushstrokes of burnt orange and crimson danced with soft lavenders and deep indigos, bleeding into one another in a slow, breathtaking symphony of color. Above it all, the clouds drifted lazily, like forgotten thoughts passing across the face of the sky. Their edges caught the last warm glow of the setting sun, glowing momentarily in hues of gold and pink before fading into shades of violet and ash. These clouds, once bright and proud in the afternoon light, now seemed subdued, as if honoring the quiet grandeur of dusk. The world, so lively just an hour before, now seemed to slow its heartbeat. Birdsong, once lively and spirited, began to thin and fade. A few last calls echoed through the trees, sharp and fleeting, before melting into silence, giving way to the growing stillness of the evening. Birds, their wings tired after a long day in the air, returned home. One by one, they disappeared into nests nestled high among the trees or tucked into the thatched eaves of old wooden barns. The gentle hush that followed felt sacred, a silence not born of absence but of reverence. The land itself seemed to exhale. The day's heat lifted, replaced by a cooling breeze that whispered softly through the tall grasses and rustled the leaves with the gentlest touch. Lucius stood still for a moment just at the edge of the field, taking it all in. His broad shoulders, darkened by sun and labor, now carried the softness of dusk. The golden light that had danced on his tanned skin was now replaced by a gentle bluish hue, cast by the emerging night. He inhaled deeply, drawing in the earthy scent of damp soil mixed with the faint, familiar aroma of distant wood smoke. That scent, of land, labor, and hearth, always reminded him of his childhood, of long days spent learning from his father, of warm evenings huddled by the fire as stories filled the room and soup simmered over glowing coals. The cool air brushed across his face, refreshing after the heat of the sun. Behind him, his family moved with calm efficiency, their gestures practiced from countless evenings spent just like this. His wife Mira was gently shaking the dirt from a hoe, her hair falling across her face in strands lit faintly by the last traces of orange in the sky. She looked up briefly, catching his eye with a small, knowing smile. A smile that spoke of contentment, of peace, of shared purpose. Nearby, their two children, Isla and Dorian, were gathering small tools into a worn wooden crate. Their laughter, subdued but still bubbling with the joy of youth, wove itself softly through the quiet air. Even in the stillness of dusk there was life. But it was life in harmony with the setting sun. Not boisterous but reflective. Not hurried but grateful. The family worked together in unspoken rhythm. Lucius knelt beside the large oak toolbox by the shed and carefully wiped the soil from the edge of his shovel. He ran his fingers over the wooden handle, smooth from years of use, familiar in his grip. Each groove, each dent, was a memory etched in time. The tools weren't just instruments of labor. They were extensions of the family's story. Each spadeful of earth turned, each furrow carved, had been part of the quiet legacy they were building. One by one, the clean tools were returned to their proper places. Hung on pegs or laid carefully across thick wooden shelves within the small shed whose door creaked in rhythm with the breeze. Everything had its order, its rightful place. Just as in nature, where dusk followed day and stillness followed toil. As the sky deepened into a rich navy, punctuated by the first brave stars, the lowing of cattle reached Lucius's ears. He turned and looked toward the pasture. There, in the distance, the gentle silhouettes of their livestock were beginning to move. A slow, ambling procession, horned heads bobbing, hooves patting softly on the dirt path, as they made their way back home. The cows, patient and docile, lumbered along with their familiar steady rhythm, their breath rising in gentle puffs against the cooling air. Behind them, the sheep came in clusters, plump and woolly, bleating softly to one another in tones of sleepy familiarity. Lucius stepped forward to meet them, his boots crunching gently over the dry grass. With calm gestures and a soft, guiding voice, he steered them toward the enclosure. He opened the wooden gate, its hinges groaning softly, and let the animals pass through one by one. Each cow and sheep seemed to recognize its place, as if the landscape itself remembered their patterns. He paused at the gate as the last of the sheep passed through, a small lamb lingering close to its mother's side. Its wide eyes glanced at Lucius, blinking slowly, and he reached out to brush his fingers gently over its head. The lamb twitched, then relaxed, nudging his hand as it passed. Moments like that, quiet, small yet full of life's rhythm, stayed with him long after the night fell. Inside the enclosure, Lucius moved among the animals, checking their water troughs and hay bins. With practiced hands, he tossed bundles of dry grass from the storehouse, making sure each animal had enough to eat. He paused at each trough, inspecting the water's clarity, brushing away floating debris with a stick. Satisfied, he leaned against the wooden fence and watched them settle. Some of the cows had already laid down, curling their legs beneath them, their eyes half closed in quiet contentment. The sheep huddled together in small groups, their woolly backs like tufts of cloud against the earth. A sense of peace, deep and undisturbed, settled over the scene. Behind him, Mira approached silently, carrying a lantern lit with a small flame that glowed like a heartbeat against the dark. She handed it to him, and the two stood side by side for a while, their faces lit softly in the amber glow. The night deepened around them, and the stars now dotted the sky in earnest. Dozens, then hundreds, gleaming like silver seeds scattered across deep velvet. Far off, the faint sound of a neighbor's dog barking echoed and faded. Then the chirping of crickets rose, timid at first, then growing into a chorus that filled the silence with a pulse of life. It was as if the earth, in rest, still whispered to those who listened. Lucius turned to Mira and gently touched her shoulder. "We should go inside," he said quietly, as though not to disturb the night. She nodded, and together they walked back toward the house, the light of the lantern guiding their path through the tall grass. Behind them, the livestock rested peacefully, the fences sturdy, the tools in place, the day's labor complete. Their home, modest but warm, waited at the edge of the field. From its chimney rose a thin line of smoke, curling upward into the darkening sky. Inside, a warm meal awaited them, soup simmering over the hearth, bread still warm from the oven. But more than that, the home held the laughter of children, the comfort of shared silence, and the quiet pride of a day spent well. And as Lucius stepped across the threshold and closed the door behind him, the night fully embraced the land. Soft, calm, and eternal. The kind of night that didn't just mark the end of a day, but the quiet promise that another would come, that labor, love, and light would return with the dawn. Lucius's footsteps fell heavily upon the well-worn dirt path, the same path he had taken that morning, but now softened by the golden light of the setting sun. His sandals brushed against the dry earth, stirring small clouds of dust that danced momentarily in the air before settling back into the ground. Though his legs ached and his shoulders bore the dull weight of a day's toil, there was a quiet peace in his heart, a fulfillment that made the walk home feel not like a burden but a reward. The air was beginning to cool, carrying with it a familiar scent, smoke from the hearth fires rising lazily from the distant rooftops. It drifted toward him gently, wrapping around his senses like an embrace, speaking wordlessly, "Dinner is ready. Home is near." He could already picture it, his family seated in their usual places. The glow of firelight flickering across familiar faces. The warmth of togetherness stronger than any blanket. As he approached the modest stone cottage nestled among olive trees and low stone walls, a soft light flickered from the small window near the doorway. The soft hum of voices inside grew clearer, mingling with the occasional pop and crackle of the fire. Lucius stepped through the wooden door, worn smooth by years of use, and was greeted by the comforting chaos of home. Livia looked up from the clay pot she was stirring, her face framed by wisps of hair that had come loose during the evening preparations. Her eyes met his, and though no words were exchanged at first, the quiet understanding between them said enough. "You're home. You're safe. You're with us." She smiled softly, and he responded with a slight nod, placing his satchel gently on the bench by the wall. The room smelled of stew and herbs, of smoke and wood and something sweet, perhaps figs or dried apples. Their children, small and still filled with boundless energy even after the day's end, sat cross-legged near the hearth, arranging pebbles into imaginary battle lines or whispering secrets to one another that only siblings could understand. The family's dinner, as always, was simple yet comforting. A pot of bean soup simmered over the fire, thick and hearty, seasoned with garlic and sprigs of thyme. Beside it, a shallow dish of roasted root vegetables, carrots, turnips, and onions, their edges crisped golden. There might be a few slivers of smoked fish from the market, or a modest wedge of goat cheese wrapped in cloth and preserved with care. Lucius washed his hands in the clay basin by the door, splashing away the day's dust, before joining the circle near the fire. They sat on stools or woven mats, with the low table in the center, each person taking their place without instruction, because this too was part of their daily rhythm. Dinner was not rushed. Each spoonful was savored, not only for its taste but for what it represented. A reward for hard work, a gift from the land, a moment of stillness in a world that could sometimes be harsh. No one spoke loudly. Instead, the air was filled with the gentle murmur of conversation and the occasional clink of wooden spoons against clay bowls. Lucius ate slowly, letting the warmth of the food seep into his bones. His back still ached slightly from carrying water buckets and trimming vines, but he didn't mind. As he looked at his children laughing softly over some private joke, and Livia gently brushing crumbs from the youngest's chin, he felt a contentment that was hard to put into words. In that small room with its soot-darkened beams and plaster walls, there was no wealth, no luxury, but there was love. And that made it feel grander than any villa in the hills. After the last crumbs had been eaten and the bowls stacked to be washed in the morning, the family settled in closer to the fire for the evening's ritual. Storytelling? It was their favorite time, when the outside world slipped away and imagination took its place. Sometimes the children would ask for a tale of heroes and monsters, of mighty Hercules and his impossible labors, or of Odysseus braving storms and sirens to return home. Other times they longed for quieter stories, legends of the harvest goddesses, or of ancient trees that whispered to shepherds in the hills. Tonight, as the fire dimmed to embers and shadows stretched across the walls, it was Lucius who began to speak. His voice, rough from the day's labor but steady and warm, painted pictures in the flickering light. "I planted a new vine today," he said quietly, eyes reflecting the fire. "Just a little one, barely a sprout, but it's got strong roots. The soil near the western slope is soft this year. I think it'll take well." The children leaned in, though they had heard many such tales before. "But this vine, this one's special," Lucius continued, a playful glint in his eyes. "I named it Fortis, strong, because I think it's going to grow tall, even when the wind howls and the sun forgets to be kind." They listened, wide-eyed, as if he had told them of dragons or hidden treasure. To them, the story of a vine was as magical as any myth, because it was their myth, rooted in their soil. Then Livia took her turn. She reached into a small basket by her side and pulled out a roll of newly woven wool. The strands were dyed in earthy reds and browns, warm and comforting. "I finished this today," she said, unrolling the fabric for all to see. "I call it Autumn Wind. The pattern came to me while I was listening to the birds outside the loom house. You see these small lines here? They're like the breeze rustling through the leaves." The children reached out to touch it, their fingers brushing the softness with reverence. To them it wasn't just cloth, it was a story in threads, a tapestry of moments they had lived together. And so the evening unfolded. Stories traded back and forth like precious coins. Some old and revered, others new and born of the day's smallest joys. Outside, the moon had begun its slow climb, casting silver light across the fields beyond the walls. Crickets chirped in the distance, and the occasional owl hooted from a nearby olive tree. But inside, the fire still crackled softly, and the hearts of those within were warm. Eventually, one by one, the children drifted into sleep, heads resting on laps or wrapped in blankets made by loving hands. Lucius gently lifted the youngest and carried her to the sleeping mat in the corner, tucking her in with the practiced grace of a father who had done this many times before. Livia followed, smoothing the curls on the boy's forehead as he dozed, her hands gentle and steady. They exchanged a look, tired yes, but full of the quiet pride that came from days lived fully and evenings spent together. They did not need much. Not riches, nor fame, nor grand halls. Just this small fire, this small family, this sacred ordinary night. Lucius sat for a moment longer, staring into the embers. He thought of the vine he had planted, of the seasons to come. He thought of his children growing, of Livia's soft laugh, of tomorrow's sunrise waiting just beyond the hills. And with a deep breath, he stood, kissed his wife on the forehead, and let the quiet night carry them gently into rest. The fire in the hearth was slowly dying. Its once roaring flames had dwindled into gentle flickers, their dance becoming sluggish and weary. Now only a soft bed of glowing embers remained, radiating a deep orange hue, casting long drowsy shadows across the wooden walls of the home. The warmth from the hearth still lingered, wrapping the small room in a comforting embrace. It was not the fierce heat of midday or the biting cold of a winter storm, but something tender, like the final hug of a loved one before bedtime. Quiet, steady, reassuring. Lucius stood by the fireplace, his weathered hands gripping an iron poker as he gave the coals one last stir. They crackled softly, reluctant to surrender to sleep, as if echoing the last moments of the day. His movements were unhurried, almost meditative. There was no need for haste here. The day's work was done, and the night, with all its quiet blessings, had arrived. Across the room, Livia moved with similar grace. She folded the last of the woven cloths, her fingers brushing over the threads lovingly. Each piece had been made by hand, stitched with care and softened over time. She stacked them neatly in a corner, near the modest sleeping mats they would soon lay upon. The simple routine of tidying up was almost ceremonial, a gentle transition from the bustle of the day to the hush of night. They did not speak much. They did not need to. In their silence there was understanding, a rhythm born from years of living and working together, a harmony that did not require words to be heard. Only glances, small smiles, shared gestures that held entire conversations within them. Lucius rolled out the sleeping mats across the wooden floor, thick with hay and layered with hand-woven wool. He smoothed the corners with care, patting them down as if tucking in a child. Meanwhile, Livia added a few sprigs of dried lavender beneath the pillows. Its calming scent slowly filled the air, mingling with the smoky trace of the dying fire. In one corner of the room, a modest cradle rocked gently. Inside, their youngest child was already drifting into dreams, the rhythmic sway of the cradle in tune with the quiet of the home. A soft blanket rose and fell with each tiny breath, and the faintest hint of a smile played on the infant's lips, as if comforted by the warm hush around them. Outside, the wind had begun to stir. It wasn't harsh, just a whisper of movement through the trees. A breeze brushing gently against the old wooden door as if nature itself had paused to say goodnight. The sound was subtle, almost like a lullaby, the way it fluttered across the seams of the house, settling into the cracks and eaves, as if to cradle the home in its arms. Farther out, in the wide darkness of the countryside, the first notes of the night began to rise. Crickets called softly to one another, a low hum beneath the quiet, joined by the distant hoot of an owl, perched somewhere in the shadows of the trees. The song of the night creatures was familiar, comforting, a part of the evening just as natural as breath itself. Inside, Lucius lit a small oil lamp and placed it on the shelf beside the family's modest shrine. A few carved wooden figures, a bundle of dried herbs, and small tokens passed down from ancestors. The lamp's flame flickered once, then steadied, a golden glow, soft and humble, bathing the room in serenity. Livia knelt briefly in front of the shrine, bowing her head. Her lips moved silently, offering thanks for the day, for the harvest, for their health, and for the peace that had found them once more tonight. Lucius joined her, his hand resting lightly on her shoulder. There was no need for elaborate prayer. Their gratitude was deep and honest, spoken not just with words but through the life they lived. When they rose, they dimmed the lamp just slightly, letting its glow ease them into the quiet stillness of the late hour. The children were now tucked in, the older ones curled under their own blankets, already slipping between dreams and memory. Lucius paused beside each one, brushing their hair gently away from their foreheads. Livia, standing nearby, folded her arms around herself, a faint smile resting on her lips as she watched. They didn't rush. There was no call to hurry. The night belonged to rest, to reflection, to this sacred pause between one day's end and the beginning of another. As Lucius settled onto his mat and Livia lay beside him, they faced each other in the dim light. No words were exchanged, just a final glance, a shared breath, and the comfort of presence. The room had grown still. The embers in the hearth let out one final crackle before settling into silence. The wind outside rustled once more, then softened as though satisfied that all was well. The night deepened. The stars above wheeled slowly across the black sky. And inside that quiet home, surrounded by woods and fields and the ever-turning world, a family slept, together, and wrapped in the warmth of love and simplicity. Under the Roman night sky, night had fallen across the vast countryside of ancient Rome. A shroud of darkness stretched like a mysterious black cloak over the fields, the homesteads and the gently rolling hills. There was no sound except the soft murmur of the wind gliding through olive trees and wheat stalks, whispering ancient secrets to those who could listen. In the absence of modern city lights, the night sky emerged in its fullest glory, bold, unfiltered, and sublime. Above the Roman countryside, the heavens opened up like a grand canvas, painted not by human hands, but by the gods themselves. Thousands of stars sparkled in clusters and scattered formations, their silvery light flickering like diamonds spilled across a blanket of black velvet. Each star, no matter how distant, seemed to glow with purpose. It was as if they had been placed with intention, a celestial map inscribed with the destinies of mortals and immortals alike. To the ancient Romans this was no ordinary sky. It was divine. A realm of the gods, of Jupiter, of Mars, of Venus. They did not yet possess telescopes or scientific instruments, but they had imagination, wonder, and reverence. They believed the heavens were alive with meaning. Constellations were not mere accidents of starlight, they were stories, tales of heroes, monsters, and the eternal dance between love and war. When Roman children looked up at Orion, they saw not just a hunter but a warning. When elders traced the lines of Ursa Major, they did so with voices low, remembering myths passed from their ancestors. The sky was a scroll, a timeless manuscript written by divine hands, reminding mankind of its place, humble yet honored, in the vast order of the cosmos. Among the many scattered farms in the countryside, nestled between two hills and surrounded by vineyards, was the modest home of a Roman family. It belonged to Lucius, a farmer of modest means but deep character, who labored daily alongside his wife and sons to till the earth and tend their olive trees. Though not of noble birth, Lucius took pride in his role as a steward of the land, a participant in the eternal rhythm of seasons that mirrored the celestial cycles above. That evening, as darkness enveloped the land, the small dwelling of Lucius had grown still. The glow of oil lamps had long since faded, their flames extinguished one by one as the household prepared for sleep. The hearth, once lively with the crackle of firewood, now held only a faint amber glow, the last breath of warmth lingering in the ashes. Inside the single-room house, silence settled like a second blanket over everything. Rough-hewn wooden beams lined the ceiling, supporting a roof of thatch that rustled ever so slightly in the breeze. The scent of the day's harvest still clung to the air, the earthy aroma of soil and hay, mingled with the faint trace of herbs that Lucius's wife had laid to dry earlier that day. In the corner of the room stood the family's sleeping arrangements. Simple cots made of straw, laid with woolen blankets that were coarse to the touch but lovingly stitched by hand. There was no luxury here, only necessity and love. Lucius lay still, his body aching from the labor of plowing under the sun, but his mind oddly awake. Beside him, his wife breathed softly, her form curled beneath the covers. On the other side of the room, their two sons, barely older than boys, slumbered soundly, their faces relaxed in the purity of deep sleep. Their breathing created a soft rhythm, a kind of lullaby formed by the harmony of life shared in close quarters. In that small, dark room, the rise and fall of each chest was a quiet declaration. We are safe. We are together. Despite his fatigue, Lucius's thoughts wandered. He stared at the wooden beams above and imagined the sky beyond them, the stars still shining just as they always had. He recalled what his grandfather used to say, "The stars are the same ones that watched Romulus and Remus. They will watch your sons and your sons' sons, long after we return to the soil." There was both comfort and humility in that thought. The idea that one's life, however small, was part of something eternal. Lucius was not a philosopher nor a poet, but he felt the quiet awe of the universe just as deeply. He had stood many times in the field at night, head tilted back, watching the heavens while his oxen rested and the crickets sang. He had no words for what he felt then, only a silence in his chest, like something sacred had brushed past him. He had no need to explain it. The stars needed no interpreter. His youngest son, Marcus, had recently begun asking questions about Jupiter's lightning, about why the moon changed shape, and whether the gods ever listened when he spoke to them in whispers. Lucius smiled at the memory. He did not always know the answers, but he knew to honor the questions. "Keep asking, my son," he would say, "even the gods must love a curious heart." Outside the home, the land slept too. The vines wrapped around their wooden posts, resting after a long day of soaking in the sun. The cattle lay in their pens and the chickens huddled close for warmth. A dog barked distantly, one solitary note carried on the wind, then silence again. This peace, this deep, uninterrupted calm was a kind of wealth, not counted in coins but in stillness, in the quiet dignity of a life lived in rhythm with the earth. Lucius understood this better than most. There were no feasts in his home, no golden goblets or ivory statues, but there was something more precious, a sense of belonging to the land, to his family, to the cosmos above. As he finally allowed his eyes to close, the warmth of the dying hearth barely brushing his toes, Lucius breathed in slowly. He could still smell the scent of laurel leaves hanging from the ceiling beams. He could still feel the presence of his family, their nearness like a soft shield against the unknown. And above him, though he could not see them, the stars continued their vigil, unmoving, unblinking, eternal. In this quiet corner of the Roman world, life pulsed gently beneath the heavens. No battles raged here, no emperors plotted, no temples rose in marble glory. But in this humble home, under this magnificent sky, something sacred endured. A man slept. His wife slept. Their children dreamed. And the universe watched, not with judgment, but with the same patient grace it had always offered, to farmers and kings alike. The night deepened. The hills grew darker. The stars continued to spin slowly above the earth, drawing invisible circles through time. And within the wooden walls of Lucius's home, one more chapter of human life unfolded quietly. Not in grandeur but in peace. Not in history books but in the heart of the land itself. At this moment, Lucius's mind was no longer tethered to the concerns of tomorrow's work. The ledger books, the clatter of tools, the unpredictable weather, the anxious glances at the sky in fear of storms or drought. None of it held space in his thoughts anymore. The weight that so often sat heavy on his shoulders had lifted, dispersed like morning mist beneath the warmth of the sun. Instead, his consciousness drifted, calmly, deliberately, into a realm untouched by time or responsibility. He allowed his thoughts to wander freely, not toward tasks yet to be done, nor debts yet to be paid, but toward a gentler world. A world that asked for nothing and offered peace in return. He pictured the fields, Wide, open stretches of land bathed in silver light from the moon above. The rows of crops stood still, cloaked in night's hush. Every stalk and every leaf gleamed with the faintest shimmer, kissed by moonbeams. No wind stirred them now. And yet they seemed to breathe, slowly, rhythmically, as if the earth itself exhaled, content in its nightly rest. Lucius imagined the gentle rustling of dry grass brushing softly against his boots as he strolled barefoot through the edge of the field. A coolness clung to the soil, and a faint earthy scent rose from the ground, rich and honest. The stars overhead blinked quietly, their silent flickers forming ancient constellations he had once learned from his grandfather. Tales of hunters, of lions, of mythic birds, etched into the cosmos, their light traveling for centuries only to meet his gaze now. A low, familiar sound carried from the barn. It was the deep sigh of a resting cow, the occasional shuffle of hooves against wooden floors. Lucius could see them in his mind's eye. His cattle nestled in warm hay, their bodies rising and falling with slow, peaceful breaths. There was no agitation, no fear. Only comfort, only stillness. He thought of harvest time. Perhaps in the dream that would soon embrace him, he would find himself walking through golden fields at dawn. The wheat would sway in waves, each stem heavy with promise. Under the soft touch of the sun, the fields would glitter like a sea of gold. And in the distance he would see vines climbing over wooden trellises, heavy with grapes dark and plump, nearly bursting with sweetness. The air would be filled with the scent of ripeness, of fruit on the brink of becoming wine, of soil that had given generously. And as he imagined this bounty, a subtle smile crept onto Lucius's lips. It was not the smile of victory, nor ambition fulfilled, but the quiet smile of a man who asked for little, and found joy in simple dreams. Dreams of peace, of sufficiency, of life in rhythm with the land and sky. The night outside whispered its own lullaby. The crickets sang in a gentle, steady chorus, their rhythm unbroken, like a heartbeat beneath the stars. From somewhere further in the brush, another insect joined, its notes higher, softer, like a flute woven into the deeper hums of the cricket's song. A breeze stirred the tall oaks that surrounded Lucius's home. It moved like a ghost through the branches, lifting a leaf here, ruffling a canopy there. Its voice was low and calming, a hush that swept through the trees like an old lullaby passed down by the wind itself. Together, these sounds wove a symphony of stillness, a nocturne composed by nature, one not meant to excite the soul but to soothe it, to slow the pulse, to soften the edges of the day's hardness, and carry the weary heart toward rest. There was no need for haste now, no task that demanded urgency, no voice calling his name. All that remained was this sacred stillness, a quiet so profound it filled every crevice of the room and spilled into the hollows of Lucius's chest. He felt his body melt into the bed beneath him, his limbs heavy but not burdened, only surrendered. His thoughts were no longer thoughts but sensations, the sense of cool sheets against his skin, the distant creak of a shutter swaying gently in its frame, the knowledge that outside these walls the world continued turning, but for now it asked nothing of him. He had found sanctuary, not in walls or locks or gates, but in the permission he gave himself to be still, to want nothing more than the breath in his lungs and the silence in his bones. In that rare and sacred space between waking and sleep, Lucius remembered what it meant to simply exist, to be, not as a farmer, not as a provider, not as a man with duties and debts and plans, but as a soul suspended in the quiet embrace of night. He saw himself walking a dirt path beneath the stars, a lantern in his hand, but it was unlit, because the moon was full and bright, and it cast his shadow ahead of him, long and slender like a memory. In that vision the world was slower, Every footstep echoed with purpose. Not the purpose of reaching a destination, but the purpose of the step itself. Each breath he took was deliberate. Each glance held wonder. He bent down to touch the earth, to feel its coolness seep into his fingers. And in that simple gesture he felt connected to something ancient, something eternal. A truth older than worry, older than duty, older than man himself. Lucius did not fear sleep as some men did. He did not see it as a surrender, but a return to the dreamscape where hope was planted, and peace took root. In sleep he could return to places lost in the light of day. The smell of his mother's bread in the oven, the warmth of his father's calloused hands guiding his own, the laughter of his brothers echoing through the hills. Time did not steal those things. It simply moved them to another room, and sleep was the key to that door. So he let go of tension in his shoulders, of tightness behind his eyes, of thoughts that tried to stir again, only to be quieted by the lull of night's music. Outside, the wind whispered once more, soft and steady, as if assuring him that all was well, that the land was resting, the animals were safe, the sky had not forgotten him. His last thought before surrendering to slumber was not a sentence, but a feeling, a deep, grounding sense of enoughness. That despite the uncertainty of tomorrow, despite the toil and the worry and the roads yet to walk, tonight, right now, everything was as it should be, and in that truth, Lucius found rest. The night, a sanctuary for the soul. The night is not merely the absence of sunlight, it is a sacred pause, a divine interlude between the chaos of day and the promise of tomorrow. It is during these silent hours, beneath the velvet canopy of stars, that the body finds its deepest rest, and the mind, so often restless, cluttered, overstimulated, finally exhales, releasing the noise, the haste, the countless burdens accumulated throughout the waking hours. Nighttime is not just a span of time. It is a realm of stillness, a world apart, a sanctuary for the weary and the wise alike. Imagine it now. A vast blanket of inky black, gently draped across the curve of the earth. A cosmic cloak, soft and mysterious, stretching from horizon to horizon. It covers mountains and oceans, cities and forests with equal grace, silencing the roar of engines, subduing the flicker of neon lights, tempering even the frantic pulse of technology. Within this hush, there is peace. Gone are the deadlines, the alarms, the honking of horns and the endless scrolling through glowing screens. All is muted, all is hushed. The world seems to lean back in its seat, to sigh, to simply be. This is the moment when you too are invited to let go. Let go of the roles you played today, the decisions you made, the words you spoke or wished you had, the things you carried but did not name. Let the night take them from your shoulders. Let it draw them away like the tide. For the darkness is not your enemy, it is your ally, a guardian of dreams, a keeper of ancient silence. Breathe deeply now. Feel the rhythm of your breath. Steady, unforced, like waves upon a quiet shore. With each exhale, surrender more of your thoughts. With each inhale, invite in the stillness, the simplicity of just existing, of being nothing more than breath, than presence, than life wrapped gently in the folds of night. In this sacred stillness, something stirs beneath the surface of your consciousness. A memory, feeling, a distant whisper of something more ancient than civilization itself. You are no longer in your room, no longer in your city or century. You are cradled in the same darkness that once blanketed the vast plains of Mesopotamia, that once watched over the frozen tundras where early humans huddled around fire, that once settled like a gentle veil upon the domes of Constantinople and the rooftops of Rome. Yes, even in the days of emperors and poets, night held this same sacred power. to slow time, to soften sorrow, to invite reflection, and to mend what had been frayed during the hours of light. On distant Roman fields now reclaimed by earth and silence, once filled with footsteps and battle cries, now only the wind walks there, and the stars still shine in the same patterns overhead. Unmoved by centuries, unchanged by empire, night has always borne witness to the rise and fall of nations, to love blooming in secret, to the quiet passing of generations whose names we no longer speak. Yet within the darkness, their stories remain. Perhaps that is why night carries such a weight of mystery. Why even the most modern soul cannot help but feel something eternal when the lights go out. It is not just sleep we enter, it is a return to a more primal way of knowing. A state before language and logic, before identity and expectation. It is the return to simply being. Just as animals rest without worry, just as trees sway without thought, we too in our truest nature long for that surrender. We crave the gentle letting go of control, of comparison, of the unending march forward. And night, patient and forgiving, offers us this gift daily. So let the darkness hold you now, like a mother tucking in her child, like the earth cradling its seeds in the cold months, safe, silent, and full of promise. Let go of fear, it does not serve you here. Let go of urgency, there is nothing left to do. Let go of noise, only quiet remains, and in it, great wisdom. This is your invitation, to float in the softness of now, to listen not with your ears but with your spirit, to allow the ancient hum of the universe to lull you into dreams. And as you drift, know that you are not alone. All across the world others rest too, under different skies, in different homes, but wrapped in the same mystery, bound by the same darkness that erases walls and borders, status and sorrow. This is the universal womb of night, where healing begins, where imagination awakens, where the soul comes out of hiding. Let your mind wander now, not in fear but in curiosity. Let it stroll down the cobbled paths of forgotten villages. Let it climb the ruins of Roman temples under moonlight. Let it stand in the quiet of a medieval chapel where only candlelight flickers. Let it listen to the breeze rustling the leaves of olive trees older than kings. These are the dreams the night can give you. Stories not just of your life but of life itself. Of humanity's long, tangled journey through time. Of hope that persisted even in the darkest ages. Of beauty born from silence. Of truths hidden in shadow. And when morning comes, soft and golden, like a whisper breaking through the curtain of sleep, you will rise not only refreshed, but reborn. You will carry with you the wisdom of the stars, the stillness of ancient lands, and the quiet confidence of knowing that rest is not weakness, it is power. So tonight, surrender willingly to the night. Let it envelope you not as an ending but as a return. Let it become your temple, your sanctuary, your healing space. Close your eyes and let the night speak its gentle lullaby, a song older than words, a rhythm slower than breath, a silence more meaningful than speech. In this place, there is nothing to achieve, nothing to prove, only the sacred act of being still, and letting the darkness do its quiet work. Let it cradle your weary limbs. Let it soften the walls you've built within. Let it smooth the furrows of your mind. And as you descend into dream, may the stories of those who came before you rise to meet you, not to haunt, but to comfort, to remind you that even across centuries and empires, the night has always been a source of peace. Whether you sleep in a skyscraper or a straw hut, whether you're surrounded by machines or only moonlight, whether you rest in the modern world or in the forgotten fields of Rome, the night is the same. Its silence, eternal. Its embrace, unconditional. So close your eyes. Breathe deeply, slowly, and allow the darkness to gather you home. The world will wait. For now, just rest. The day has drawn to a close. Another cycle of time has quietly completed its course. In the golden twilight that gently fades into night, there lies a timeless stillness. A silence that wraps around the earth like a warm blanket, gently urging every creature to rest. And in that silence, if you listen closely, you might just hear the quiet footsteps of history echoing across the fields. The life of a Roman farmer. So simple, so unadorned. And yet, it holds within it a profound wisdom. A way of living that speaks of harmony with nature, of patience carved by the seasons, and a deep, unwavering gratitude for the soil that gave life. Each day begins not with haste, but with reverence. As the sun rises over the hills of Latium or the fertile plains of Campania, the farmer rises with it. He doesn't rush into the day with anxiety. He listens to the world awakening, to the rustle of olive branches, to the distant bleating of sheep, to the soft coo of doves nesting in the rafters above. And in that sacred quiet, before the tools are lifted and the fields are walked, he offers thanks. To the gods of hearth and harvest, to the rain that fed the barley, to the hands of his ancestors, whose sweat and toil shaped the very furrows he now tends. There is a rhythm to his life, dictated not by clocks or deadlines, but by the wind, by the stars, by the slow, sacred movement of the earth beneath his feet. He does not resist time, he flows with it, and in doing so he becomes a part of something eternal. At dusk, when the last of the light brushes against the vines and the oxen are led home, his work does not end in exhaustion. It concludes with fulfillment. There is a quiet dignity in each calloused hand, in each footstep worn into the earth. He returns to a modest home, not grand by our modern standards, but filled with warmth, with the smell of herbs drying by the hearth, with laughter, with stories passed down like sacred heirlooms. In the flickering firelight, the day is recounted, not with complaint but with joy. A stubborn weed that refused to yield, a tomato vine that bore fruit early this year, a neighbor who shared a wineskin and a tale from the hills. And when night finally descends, wrapping the countryside in a velvet hush, the farmer does not resist it. He surrenders to it gratefully. He lays his head down with peace in his heart, knowing that what was needed today has been done, that nothing more is asked of him but rest. It is in this world, humble and grounded, that we find a lesson we too easily forget. We who live in a time of constant motion, who chase goals, notifications, approvals, and ambitions at a dizzying pace. We who often measure our worth by how full our calendars are, how many tasks we checked off before sleep. We have lost something. The Roman farmer reminds us of what that something is. He shows us the art of patience, of moving slowly and with intention, of finding meaning not in the extraordinary, but in the quiet ordinary. A seed planted, a loaf baked, a sunset watched without distraction. He teaches us how to wait for things to grow, how to work with the seasons, not against them, and most importantly, how to listen to the land, to ourselves, to the small voices we've buried beneath the noise. So tonight, as your day comes to a close, as the world outside quiets down and the artificial lights flicker behind curtains, take a moment, breathe deeply, close your eyes, and remember the peaceful images painted by history. Picture a moonlit field, where stalks of wheat sway gently under a starry sky. Imagine a small house nestled in a grove of fig trees, its windows glowing softly, the scent of rosemary drifting through the air. Hear the faint crackle of the hearth, the whisper of an old lullaby sung in Latin, long forgotten but forever etched in the wind. Let these images fill the corners of your mind. Let them anchor you in a place untouched by the chaos of modern life, a place where time slows down, where worries dissolve like morning mist over the Tiber, where the soul finally finds space to breathe. Let these quiet moments, these stories from a world that once was, guide you gently into sleep. Not just sleep of the body but rest for the spirit, rest that reaches down into the roots of who you are, into the ancient places within you that still remember what it means to live simply, gratefully, harmoniously. Tonight, may your dreams take you across rolling Roman hills, past shepherds singing to the moon, past children playing beneath fig trees, past vineyards kissed by twilight, where the laughter of generations still lingers in the leaves. May you drift into a slumber cradled by stories, by memories, by the wisdom of lives lived slowly, deliberately. Here at History Nook we are always here, waiting quietly, with another tale in hand, another echo from the past ready to whisper into your ear. Whenever the world grows too loud, whenever your heart longs for silence, whenever your soul needs a warm place to rest, we are here, ready to bring you stories not just to learn from, but to feel, to dream with, to sleep beside. So for now, close your eyes, let go of the day, and allow yourself the gift of stillness. Sleep deeply tonight, and peacefully, wrapped in the gentle whispers of the past, guarded by the timeless tales of those who came before you, held softly in the arms of memory and moonlight. Good night. From all of us at History Nook, sleep well, and may the stories guide you home.